Hey everybody, welcome to the Ryan Stick Show. I'm Ryan Stick, that's my namesake, and tonight on the show, I have not one, but two directors of my new favorite Christmas action movie ever. Please give a warm welcome to the Nelms brothers. How's it going, guys? Woo!
It's good. Thanks for having us, Ryan. We appreciate it, man.
Oh, I appreciate it so much too. I interviewed my friend Cassandra, who is on your makeup team, and one of your elves named Damien. And
Yeah.
it was, yeah. And I was so happy when Cassandra's like, "Oh, I'm glad you liked it. It was fun working on it." I'm like, "You worked on FATMAN?" Because before we get into, I just want to talk to you about my history with your movie. My best friend Jay is a lifelong Mel Gibson fan, loves Lethal Weapon, and we both knew this movie was coming out, but I was busy living life and stuff. And Jay, he's the type of guy that buys a Blu-ray on the first day. And he's like, "Dude, you gotta see this movie." I'm like, yeah, I will. He's like, no, dude, you gotta see this movie. So he lent me his Blu-ray. And I pop it on, and I'm kind of expecting kind of like he said, and this year he's pissed, bang, 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 like more like a machete thing. I did not expect to see this beautiful Unforgiven style Western Santa Claus movie, and it just completely blew me away. And I just wanted. It's really nice to be able to say to you two directly how much your movie, how much I needed your movie this Christmas season. I needed something new, and being the age I am, I'm like 36. I kind of like. I'm remembering some of my golden days, and I'm kind of like disenfranchised with it. So I was connecting with it on so many levels. How the hell does FATMAN come into existence? Because this sounds like a long road. Tell me the story of this incredible film.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. It's definitely it was definitely a marathon, and you're right, man. It was definitely not easy to get this particular Santa story and this tone and flavor out into the world. There was certainly a lot of pitches came at us to change the tone and sort of pivot, but I only saw it one way.
Yeah, it took 14 years to get it to screen. Like, I think we were toying around with the idea like a year before we wrote the script, and the first thing we did was we each wrote a short story, and Eshom's more reflects the actual film that you see, and mine was more of a prequel. That wasn't on purpose. We just talked about the idea, which is kind of our process. We brainstorm, we talk about the idea, and then we kind of go away and start writing. And then we come back together and and then whatever we like, we start kind of swapping it back and forth and improving the pages, hopefully, improving and getting us both synced up so that when we finish, it's like, okay, we both like this. It gets approved. We move on, and that's kind of how it works.
Yeah.
We go one at a time. But from this idea, it came from, there's the Tim Allen version, the family-friendly version of Santa. There's Santa coming down a chimney to kill you with a hatchet, and there really wasn't this realistic version of Santa, we felt, and I mean realistic in that something like Unbreakable is what you would say is like a realistic superhero movie. It was either either ham-fisted or really sweet and saccharine or goofy or like a straight-up horror film.
Yeah.
So in our like, we lean towards like what we grew up on eating our Cheerios to and loving was more of like this kind of Sergio Leone Western type vibe. Unforgiven, great reference that absolutely is playing in our minds constantly. As we mentioned, Unbreakable, Dirty Harry. Like, I mean, these types of more like grounded with a dark sense of humor types of films. I mean, you watch Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, it's really funny in parts. You know what I mean? Like when these characters having their little moments, it's actually really funny, but it's also, exactly, aliens.
Hey, Blondie. Hey, Blondie. Hey, Blondie. That's not racist, everyone. That's how it's dubbed. It's an accurate interpretation.
But he's fantastic, and he is funny, and so is Eastwood. Eastwood's really funny in a lot of parts. His one-liners are like priceless.
Yeah.
But that's what we grew up on. That's what we love. We love these kind of weird, dark, twisted films. We definitely gravitate more towards genre mixing, genre bending type films rather than stuff that's just kind of straight down the middle, no matter what genre.
And we were excited because we hadn't seen something like this before.
Yeah, that as well. When you feel like you've got something that hasn't been done before, or at least it's a little like 25 degrees left of what has been done before. that excites us. Like that's really what gets us excited. I remember like having a similar experience watching something like Army of Darkness, you know, like watching a movie like that. I remember when we were like, we were like 12 or 13 or 14 when that came out, and we couldn't have been just howling with laughter more as we were watching that movie, just because it was such a weird genre bend. It was such a cool, weird movie, and it kind of everything that was happening in that movie was so unexpected, you know. And you just couldn't tell what it was going to do or where it was going to go. But when we got there, it all made sense. And that really is kind of how we try to replicate when we make a movie. It's like, let's try to keep them guessing. Let's try to keep them, you know, on their toes while we're rolling through this.
But as you can imagine, telling the Santa tale was not an easy pitch to studios. I think half the time they just wanted to see the maniacs that would walk through the door. You know, what kind of Christmas trauma do we have? And fortunately, we had nothing. We have an extreme reverence for Christmas.
Wonderful parents. They never beat us with bamboo sheep.
Mom and Dad went hard during Christmas, particular, but and treated us well. But you had to get everything that you wanted in on Christmas, you know. So it was like, you know, in July, if you need a pair of shorts, it was like Christmas is coming.
You should have thought ahead on that. But when we were running around with it, it was a lot of interesting meetings. I think people got really excited about it, and why it took 14 years was like, it was a fun script to read, but the first question when we got in the door was like, okay, what is the tone of this thing? And we were like, well, it's got a Western vibe. It's these underpinnings of Western, but it's a dark comedy, but it's also dramatic and it has these action scenes. And it's also, you know,
and we're gonna have some fantastical elements, but grounded in reality.
Yeah, but it's all gonna be tied together in this sort of grounded reality. And I remember them going like, I don't even know what you're saying, you know. And this is when we were first pitching this thing, and it took until we did Small Town Crime, which was the film we did right before this. Once we did that film, which if you read that script, I think there's a chance you could read it and see that it would read kind of like a Dirty Harry script. It's got some dark humor, but it's a little more down the line of a crime film. But what we did with it, what we wanted to do with it, was sort of do our thing to it and have these kind of Western underpinnings and have action and drama and some dark comedy. And of course, while you're casting that up, you know, you start talking to those folks and they get what you're after, and those are the folks you use. So we had a brilliant cast on that. That tapped right into what we were hoping to do, and were brilliant collaborators. And that really set the tone for us. Once we made that movie and we went out and it did well, we were able to sort of point back at it. And we were like, hey, that's what we're going to do with FATMAN. And it changed everything. We walked into the rooms and it wasn't like, who are these maniacs? It was like, wow, this could be really cool if you do it like you did that movie. And we're like, exactly, that's what we want to do. So it kind of changed the whole conversation for us, which is great.
From what I heard from people that worked on it, how much the crew loved working with you guys, and how, like, you know, it's a hard shoot. You guys shot this in Canada. Around the Ontario, Ottawa area, and Canada is not only cold in jokes but in actuality. So, could you tell us a little bit about having to walk around in the hell that is currently I feel when I walk my dog? I can't imagine shooting for 9 hours a day outside, but you did it. So tell me about the Great White North and what a bitch it is to live to work in.
Well, I mean, look, also there's a moment where Ian and I said, you know, when we're doing the showdown, you know, in the snow and everything, and it's negative 30 degrees. And we were like, holy smokes, it would take two knuckleheads from California, you know, Southern California, where it's the most moderate climate, you know, probably in the whole country. And you're like, oh, this is a good idea to write a gun battle in the snow, you know? I mean, it
sounded great.
It was amazing.
Like a great idea.
It looked good. We were super thrilled. Yeah. I mean, you know, Ian and I were out there dressed to look like we were summiting Everest. You know, we had all the gear.
It was so cold. I was still freezing my ass off. Yeah, it's a harsh environment, but like I said, it's really beautiful. And I mean, I think that most people, from what we've witnessed, you know, you're out in it for an hour or two tops while you're trying to do something or go somewhere. But usually you're trying to skirt around that weather. Like one of our producers from the area was like, I still wear tennis shoes in winter. He's like, because I intend on spending the least amount of time outside as I can. And he's all, influence my short amount of time. I got to get inside. But yeah, it feels like that. And we had to spend upwards of 12 to 14 hours out there every day. And it would have been brutal if not for a couple of things. And one, the great Ottawa crews and Toronto crews that we had, because these folks had worked in this type of weather before.
Yeah.
And were very forthcoming with, hey, you're going to need a face mask, and hey, you're going to need this. And when you got out there, you literally like were so cold you didn't want to move. And they were just doing their job.
Yeah, and there's things you don't even think of, like the squibs freeze.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh wow, I thought of that. Like when do you think that the actual fake blood's gonna freeze in the packs?
And another amazing thing that happened when we were on set is like someone like Mel, like there was this amazing time where that shootout at the end of the film, it took us 4 days to shoot it.
There's Mel's face with everybody. Just picture Mel in the freezing temperature with Santa intensity.
And he was dressed like his character, which is in like a Carhartt jacket and some nice boots, but
also fingerless gloves.
Yeah. And he's not dressed to be out in the elements for any certain amount of time. And although he had some long johns and some hot pockets, like he's not really dressed to be out there very long. And so he would just have his assistant keep him a steady supply of green tea coming to him. And he stayed out there for 12 to 14 hours with us every day, refused to go into the warming tents as like an act of solidarity, and was like, if you're in this, I'm in this. And that pretty much galvanized the entire crew and cast. He'd stay out there and just BS with us and joke with us and tell stories. And of course, everybody is pumping him about Lethal Weapon and what about, Braveheart and Hacksaw Ridge and Apocalypto, and everyone just asking him all these questions. And he's just having a good time hanging out there in solidarity and really galvanizing everybody to just keep trudging. Cause he was such a trooper, man.
Yeah.
Amazing. I have to give my best friend, like I was telling you about, who lent me the Blu-ray, total credit in as to like his enthusiasm. Cause like I said, I wasn't sure if it was going to be like a Machete type of film, but he's like, no, dude, it's like a Western. And I'm like, I've seen every Christmas movie under the sun, and I've never seen Santa portrayed like that. And furthermore, when I was watching the movie, every time you go to the North Pole, it always is the part that loses me. Like Steven Spielberg has famously said, he doesn't really like Hook. He likes Hook until they get to Neverland. And I find that that's the problem with the Tim Allen movies. And, Kurt Russell's an amazing Santa, but the second movie, they're in the North Pole the whole time. And it loses me because I'd rather Santa invade reality as opposed to, reality trying to invade nonsense or the nonsense that the North Pole has to be to function. So in this movie, you're in the North Pole pretty much the North Pole setting pretty much the entire time. And it feels like my family's land in Hudson. Like, I love that. I love, like, that's a North Pole you could find. And that's the North Pole you could have a gunfight at, apparently. But how was it hard? Was it hard to, like, suppress the Santa myths, what you wanted to show, what you didn't want to show? Because there's reindeer, but there's no big bright sleigh twinkling everywhere. Like, was it budgetary reasons, or was it like practical reasons why you really kept Santa Claus's more magical elements behind closed doors, quite literally?
Well, I remember when we were writing the idea, or we were coming up with the script, we literally cut those parts out, and we did it on purpose. We just said, we've seen this 100 times. We don't want to try to we
don't need the sleigh going silhouetted across the moon,
like those are the shots that you've seen in every movie that we were trying to avoid. And we were literally like, what is the antithesis to those moments? And so we sort of shoot before and after those moments, which is what we were after. And we were after also that gritty reality that was in between those moments. So it made sense to us. And I think it made sense in the script when we're using those moments to push the story forward and the characters forward, rather than I don't want to say cliched, but the more Christmassy elements that you would see in every other film. And we were just like, those are so schmaltzy. We were like, it doesn't really fit in the reality that we're trying to create. And every schmaltzy scene you have is going to pull you out of it. Yeah. So even when we were trying to construct the elves, we were like, okay, like what, like, and it came down to things like this. We're like, okay, the way we're going to have to approach this is, how would these people or these things or this world really exist? And like, okay, how would the elf be able to go down to the grocery store? So while we're writing it, we're like, if he can really go down to a grocery store but still, work with some of these tropes that you have for elves, it's like, okay, yeah, he's got the pointy ears. If he put on a beanie, he'd cover those up. Well, he's got kind of a green complexion, not Martian green, silly Martian cartoon green, but he's got slightly green.
Yeah.
So it also added these cool elements of like, oh, I see where the myth came from. I see why Coca-Cola pushed that so hard, because it was just a slight discoloration. Or
there's Damien right there.
There's Damien. There's the man.
Yeah. Damien, handsome, charismatic, amazing storyteller, Damien.
Love the guy.
He was fantastic.
Yeah.
We really used him a lot and had a lot of fun with him because he was so into it that we were just like, hey, Damien, you want to try this? He's like, yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay,
this coffee cup to Chris.
He's like, yeah. So it was, and he had this great look and this great energy about him. So yeah, I think every movie you do that, right? Whether someone's a leading man or an extra or I don't know, whatever, because there's times where he's kind of, in the foreground in the action. Like it's fun to find people that are as excited about it as you are, because you put those people up front and use them a lot,
And I think just to circle back a little bit to the sort of fantasy of it and reality, like we were really looking for like the blue collar perspective. So our parents have a ranch, and they have horses. And so we don't look at horses as like, oh, these like marvelous animals that you go galloping around like Black Stallion on. Like we look at them as Ian and I had to get up every morning at 6 a.m. and go feed those suckers in the dark with a headlamp on. And we're like, oh, that's the reality of owning horses. Like that's Chris's reality of owning reindeer. Like this man's got to be out in the barn draining them.
It's freezing. Like the reality of owning horses is you're shoveling shit, feeding them at terrible hours. They're always like getting hurt or need a vet, or they're always ruining anything you have planned. And I mean, animals are wonderful, horses are wonderful. But that's the reality of owning animals, is that
like kids, in a lot of
like
ways.
they're like children, and they take priority over everything. So like a lot of stuff, you're like, I just can't do that. Sorry, I got to feed these horses at 5 a.m. And you're like, oh man.
I mean, with the sleigh, we were like, oh, you know what? Like, let's just give him a glimpse of the sleigh, and he's like working on it, like an old truck.
Yeah.
It's like a piece of equipment that he constantly needs to maintain. So that was sort of the perspective that we went into with a lot of the sort of fantastical elements. Was like how to make them utilitarian in a way.
Yeah. So Santa Claus goes through a lot of a character. Santa Claus. What I love about this movie, two things really quick. Number one, I rewatched the movie today, and I hadn't seen it since the first time I saw it with my jaw on the floor for 1 hour and 46 minutes. And, I'm like, I should watch it again, though. And the one thing that really gets me is that as I rewatched it and having seen the ending, I only noticed that on Christmas Eve, when he's heading out, he's wearing the coat.
Yeah.
But by the end of the movie, when mentally he's different, he's wearing the coat differently. All of a sudden, the coat at the end is a uniform again. But in the beginning, he's casually, it's almost falling off of him as he's walking outside to go do another Christmas. And I love that, because every Christmas movie is just like Christmas is the Super Bowl, but to him, Christmas is another day of work.
Yeah.
And I love that. And while rewatching it, I'm like, this is fucking brilliant. Like I said, every Christmas movie under the sun, and Christmas is the Super Bowl mega be all end all. You guys get Christmas out of the way. 20 something minutes in, Christmas is come and gone, and then it's just like life at Santa carries on. I love that. Was that a decision in the beginning to kind of like throw Christmas Eve away like that in order to concentrate on the character and not like the upcoming event?
100%, absolutely. And there was, look, man, there was a lot of requests for like, oh, we need to see him tiptoeing past windows of like sleeping kids and things like that.
He goes and lays presents in somewhere. We're sneaking in and out of a chimney.
And
we're like,
no, man. Shot, like it's not hard to shoot that stuff,
Yeah.
but we were like, that's just not this movie. It's never gonna be a movie. And so
we didn't want to lean into it anyway. And I remember there were a couple of times when we were looking for financing. I mean, there's a couple different versions of this movie where execs at places, we probably could have gotten a higher budget. They were like, hey, if you center this around Christmas, like maybe, the shootout and everything comes the day before Christmas or on Christmas or right when he gets back and, the day after, like right after he, like let's center it around that being the apex. And we're like, no, like that's the whole antithesis of the idea of what we're trying to do. So
yeah, the holiday is just a catalyst to get the engine going.
And like you said, I mean, that was absolutely on our mind that it's a work day for him, right? He's been doing it for 1,000 years or so. So it's like, this is another day for him. And the other side of that is that maybe he'd be a little happier if things were going a little better, but he really is on a down tick. He's probably he's hitting the bottom, So it's like,
yeah,
he wouldn't be so ho jolly as he walks out the door. He's kind of pissed off, and he's trying to figure out how to fix everything, and he doesn't have any answers. So of course he's going to be a little grumbly up front.
Yeah, he's totally disenchanted. I mean, he's nipping on a flask, I mean,
slaying and drinking, probably not a good idea.
exactly. It's just like they're like, oh, can we see him creeping past windows? It's like, do you really want to show a half drunk Santa Claus like going into kids' houses
before he goes in?
Yeah. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to bring up, and she, in my opinion, is the anchor of the entire movie. Like Mel Gibson plays the shit out of this role. He's one of the best Santas I've ever seen, and it's thanks to your script, your story, and your tone. But she is by far the greatest Mrs. Claus I have ever seen portrayed cinematically, and both me and my darling really agree on that, because we're like, wow, this makes they're surrounded by elves, but it's real because of her. And as much as he goes off the rails, she brings him back. And I'm not going to say how or why. That's why you got to see this movie, everyone. But wow, just her performance just blew me away. Can you tell about casting this magnificent thespian into this role?
Well, I remember when we pitched the idea to Mel, because when Mel first chatted with us and talked with us, he didn't have any idea. He had just read the script, So he read the script. He was like, oh yeah, hey, I love this. Let's sit down. I think it's funny. I'm like, okay, great. And then when we sit there and talk with him and start to unveil sort of and this is why you meet an actor before you head out on the trail, together. And we start talking about the new.
Oh, they froze just for a sec. Hey, you guys froze there just for a second. As they're coming back on, everybody, as we're waiting for the internet reconnect to happen, interviewing the two directors of FATMAN right now, the Nelms brothers. I'm going to call them the Super Nelms brothers. And right now, we're just verifying the internet's got to catch back up. And until it does, I'm just going to put a little close up on me. I'm having an amazing time. If you have any questions for the guys, write them down there. We will get to them, and it's going to be great. And if you haven't yet, I strongly suggest you get the Blu-ray of this movie, because it's only $20. I believe it's a Walmart exclusive, and it's one of the best purchases I've ever made, full of special features. It's just absolutely awesome. All right. So just waiting to reconnect with the fellas. Cool. Well, they'll be back in just a second as they reconnect. Yeah. Just going to bring up a few things. Jasmine Gunn, my buddy, and her brother, they're both my buddies. So we watched this movie on Christmas Day. Really great. Jasmine, we're going to tell them that you said that as soon as they get back. They're just getting back on the internet. It's all good. Everyone out there, I'm so happy this is happening. And Ryan Six Show, we're going to be going live each and every week. We're going to try to get you the greatest guest. And we're just going to try to entertain the crap out of you during quarantine, because that's what we like to do. I'm just going to shoot them a little message and say, yeah. Hey, guys. Just click the link again. Link. You guys just click the link again. Cool. They'll be back in a second. StreamYard's a little weird sometimes when it comes to people that have Safari as a browser. Anyhow, just a little thing, everybody out there. For those of you who have no idea what FATMAN is a Christmas action movie, but I should say it's just a movie about a man named Chris who happens to be over 1,000 years old and has been doing this Christmas thing the entire time. Has become a little disenfranchised with how kids don't care anymore about Christmas, and they don't care if they get coal, and they're just they just do what they do, and he's very grumbly about it. And basically what happens is this really rich kid who's very spoiled, he gets coal for Christmas and gets very mad, so he hires a professional assassin to go hunt down Santa Claus. Will he find him? Will he not? He probably will find him, and maybe or maybe not, a certain gunfight might happen at the end. So without further ado, we're just waiting for the guys to get back on, but I saw this movie, blew my mind, absolutely awesome. And yeah, Cool. Just waiting for the guys to get back on. All right, they're back. Woo! And they're back. Awesome.
Technology, man. Sorry.
Hey, dude, it's all good. I'm getting really good when things mess up, but just pulling out whoopee cushions and just being like, all right, yeah. Anyway, I'm getting really good at managing Griswold luck. Yeah. So we were just talking about Mrs. Claus and the how out of all Santa Claus movies, I find this is the most integral performance by somebody, and the importance of a Mrs. Claus in a movie. Because before that, Mrs. Claus is just kind of like, oh, does someone need a cookie, which she says in this. But underneath that, if Mrs. Claus wasn't her and who she was, Santa would have fallen off a cliff years ago, decades ago. So please, you were in the middle of telling me about casting this amazing actress.
Sorry, I think we're still having trouble. Can you hear us all right, Ryan?
I can hear you just fine. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. As long as we're good, because
okay.
You're a little stutter stoppy for us, but that's fine because I think it's our internet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But where were we at? Sorry.
Marianne.
So
Marianne Baptiste.
Brought Marianne up to Mel.
We brought Marianne up to Mel. He loved the idea.
Yeah.
And then it was like, okay, can we get Marianne? And we went out to her and she loved the script. And yeah, it was, I mean, they were equally as hilarious and fun to work with, Mel and Marianne, as they were on screen.
That report's very natural.
Yeah, they were like punching each other in the shoulder and laughing and having a good time, in between takes. So yeah, it was a great experience, and they had such great chemistry, which makes their relationship.
They would be like throw little improvisational flourishes at the end of each scene, which was great fun for us and everybody else involved.
And we kept as many of those as we could. We kept as many that fit in the film. Yeah, like when she goes after him with the rolling pin, like that was a little improv-y moment. It was great.
All right, and and just to say, my favorite scene in this entire movie is pretty much what this still frame is, in which Santa Claus. Okay, we just lost the boys again. They'll be back. Anyway, everybody, I'm just going to describe this scene as we're waiting for the guys to get back on. That Santa Claus goes into his workshop / factory and has to tell the elves that he is pairing up with the U.S. military, because the U.S. military does know that Santa Claus exists. And they do know that Santa Claus exists, but he's been working with them. And hey, boys.
Hey, sorry. I think we're back now. For some reason, my internet took a little dump there for a second, but I think it's 100% back now. So
we should be solid.
Awesome. So I was just telling the folks, this is my favorite scene in the movie, in which Santa Claus walks into a factory and has to tell his helpers that things are changing. And the U.S. military is aware that Santa Claus exists, and it's they've been working together. How did you come up with that idea, where it's just like, not only is Santa so real, but the people in charge know, and they're collaborating?
Like the government and the military.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that came about just on us, again, like going back to the root of the problem of trying to make it real. And like when we were writing it, it was like, okay, how would this really work?
Well, even before that, it was like, where would he be? And with look, we have we're Americans, and we have that perspective. So we're like, oh, we could see America pitching him a good case as to why he should set up with America. Oh, you can use our U.S. Postal Service. We'll provide you resources. It's going to be great, right? Also,
and maybe not even having the idea that this would go upside down at some point and they'd be able to really put the screws to them as they do. But in the idea of, oh, this is really going to spur our economy down the line, and it's probably going to build into something, because it does perpetuate consumerism, and they're like, this is great.
Also, it is a reward system for good behavior. So it could be good for the youth.
How could this be bad? And of course, it all kind of turns upside down when, as Chris reveals in the movie, that he hasn't been doing what he used to be doing, which is probably going out with a little more one-on-one contact.
A little more vigor.
Hundreds of years ago, probably more one-on-one. He was probably out and about, here and there. So yeah, and he's kind of really become a recluse, and he's just kind of, you know, living off the government tit, so to speak, and just kind of doing his thing. And it's all kind of just falling apart. And so that was really, we were just brainstorming back and forth on how this would actually work, and then how would it all go to hell. And this is what we've come up with. And then it was like, well, then they'd probably like, the little bit of research on our military is that like those control panels for the fighter jets are actually done in other countries.
Yeah,
like
a vast majority of the control panels for America's, you know, weapons, aviation weapons are made overseas because they're so labor intensive that they can't afford to make them here. So,
which is nuts to think about. Oops.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it completely is nuts to think about, and especially like oh, and we have to bring up you can't have heroes in the film, especially disenfranchised heroes, without villains. And Walton Goggins is like one of my favorite actors. Everything he's in, he's just intense, insane, and apparently he's also hilarious. And he's hilarious at being insane and intense. Tell us about coming up with the skinny man. You know, for a fat man v skinny man, Walton Goggins comes in and does a killer performance, quite literally. Tell me about coming up with this gem.
I mean, first and foremost, Walton is just a savage. I mean, he comes in, he brings so many ideas. The man's a true collaborator, and you know, he's always looking to push the material and elevate it and transcend what's on the page, which is really why it was such a joy for Ian and I to work with him.
Yeah, I mean, when you sort of unleash Walton on your movie, you know, it's like he comes in with a lot, and it's, you know, and the cool thing about him is he comes in, he's like, what about this? What about that? What about this? And, you know, we come into a meeting when we first sat down with him, and he starts kind of going like, oh, I love, you know, this or whatever. He kind of stood up and he like, this is in a diner with like multiple people around. It's not an empty diner. So he's one of those guys that can just kind of get into a character, get into a space, and everything just fades away around him. So when he got up, when we first were talking with him, and he's like, I got this elf and I'm right in front of him, and I got this elf, and I'm like, hey, you know, we're like, oh my God, this is the guy. We instantly fell in love with him for the character, and he's like that on set. He's so intense.
But I wish I could say that he was in our mind's eye off the top, but he wasn't. We had been meeting with actors, and met with about half a dozen.
A bunch of great people that would have done a great job in their own right, in their own way. But when we saw Walton, and we met with him, and he was, you know, giving his spin on the character, we instantly were like, yep, that's him.
It was undeniable.
It was undeniable. So, and on set, like, I mean, he would come up with ideas like, what if I put my napkin like this in my whatever? You'd have to use, you would use some of them, and he would push it right past the line at times, and you're like, okay, we took it too far. We're now in another movie, but you know, like,
it was fun getting there.
You were right before that take, you were right there, you know, and he knows that, and that's exactly his method, is to push everything as far as he can to get the most out of it. And then, you know, of course, it's up to you at the end of the day to pick what's really lining up. And we love to work like that, because like when you're editing and when you get it home, like you want those options and you want those different levels. And he's a filmmaker as well, and he knows that. He just knows that you need that.
You guys are gonna trust me. You guys are gonna want this all. He'd run out there and do something.
Yeah, he was a blast.
But he's the one that pitched us on the Chinese restaurant scene. He was like, I want a scene where I'm eating in a Chinese restaurant.
And then we were like, okay, well, shit. And then we sat down and came up with like, okay, we'll have him eating this full duck, and okay, we'll have this woman come up and he speaks Chinese to her, and we can use that sort of Chinese theme as to why he, you know, knows the boy, you know, and his driver, you know. So we had to kind of work it in and tie it in, but he came up with a great idea, and he came up with some really funny bits in the Chinese restaurant. So I mean,
oh my gosh, or like even in the coat scene, where he's running through the coat rack.
Yeah, that was really funny
two of those takes were the same. Every time they were hilarious.
Yeah, and the way that works is like you put a couple of things in there, like he's going through the coats and he says this or that, and then he turns to the guy and says, "Hey, you got anything else or whatever?" But you know, Walton adds, you know, he ad-libs 2 or 3 lines. He never does a take the same, and he just added another flavor of hilarity to it.
Or like when he kisses the hamster. Like that was totally him. That was not in the script, so it was great. We really enjoyed working.
But what he does really well is like he gets so in tune with like what you're after, and then he builds his own world around it. So I remember like one of the one word sort of, hey, go off this kind of idea was for the character. He's like, how do you see this guy? And we're like, we see him as unpredictable. And that was pretty much what we gave him to go off of, besides all the stuff that's in the script. And then he sort of went home for a month and a half, and just went wild in building his character and who he was, and trying to make him unpredictable, and like, you know, trying to carve his own character out of this script. And he did such an amazing job. He was so much fun to work with. He really was. I mean, and having all those people on screen at different times, like, I mean, near the end there, you get Mel, Walton, and Marianne, you know, all in the same course of days for that last sequence, which was a lot of fun to see all three of those amazing actors working together.
And then it was great fun just covering him in more and more blood as the movie went along.
Yeah, to watch his progression, you know, as he goes through that ending.
Okay, and last but not least, I mean, there's not a zillion characters in this movie, which is great because it means you care and know every single one of them. But we got to talk about the boy.
Oh, Chance. Chance is amazing, man. What a gift. Honestly, we weren't panicked, but we were concerned, right? Because we'd written this character, Billy, and it's hard to get an actor of that age that could deliver the lines that we needed.
And we didn't know that. So we rewrote it. And then we went out and we're like, oh yeah, well, you know, I'm sure we're going to get, you know, Haley Joel Osment, you know, 15 years ago we're going to find that kid. I guess we're going to have to. And then of course we did, thank goodness, you know, we found Chance, and he really blew us away in his first take, because we'd gotten probably hundreds of tapes from kids around his age doing the lines. And you could just see the difference between those hundreds of kids and him delivering the lines. He really understood them. They were really layered, and he was really bringing reality to them. Whereas a lot of other kids felt a little more like a Richie Rich, you know what I mean? It felt a little more on, or they couldn't quite get.
They didn't know what they were saying.
Yeah, they didn't quite understand what they were saying, and you couldn't feel any of the layers there. And it was just a little kid saying funny lines, you know, and that's not what we wanted. We wanted a kid that you were like, that piece of shit. Like, I hate this kid, you know. We wanted you to really not like him and see the viciousness in him. But
his audition video was so good. He and I turned to each other and we were like, first of all, we breathed a really deep sigh of relief.
Yeah.
And then we said, oh my God, like, we've got to meet this kid because maybe his reel's too good.
Yeah, we got a little scared.
Maybe this is how he really is, right?
If he comes on the set and he's a little tyrant, like, that's going to be rough.
It's going to be challenging. So fortunately, you know, Chance got on with a Skype with us, and he couldn't have been more
sweet
of a gentleman. What a sweet kid. Okay. And so talented. I mean, I remember we were like, hey, you know, like, he's like, he does he reads one of the lines for us. I'm like, oh, that's great, man. You want any tweaks? I'm like, oh yeah, you know, we can give you a couple adjustments, and then you can go back and work with your coach and like send us the alt whenever you get it. He's like, no, I want to do it now.
And he's like, I don't have an acting coach.
Yeah.
Like, we're like, Jesus, really? And then he was like, yeah, this is how I did it. And his dad was helping him, you know, with the Skype and everything. And his dad was just like, no, he doesn't have an acting coach. He hasn't had an acting coach in, you know, 8 years. And we're like, oh my God. So he's a really talented kid, and he gets most of his training. He was telling us from advice off of a lot of the TV shows. He has a TV show that he's on called A Million Little Pieces. I think it's what it's called. Okay. And he's been on there for like 3 years, and there's 2 or 3 adult actors on there that, you know, he says, hey, they give me a ton of great advice, and like, you know, and like, it's just like adults, you know, giving each other advice and throwing things at each other to try. Where he said he just, you know, he's cut his teeth on that show, and he's just a talented guy, man. I think he's this big future for that young man.
Absolutely. You know, and it's, I gotta say, and it's like, I don't want to crap on anybody to bring anybody else up, but for the sake of the situation, I will say this: had Jake Lloyd been a better actor, I think I would have bought into Jingle All the Way a little bit more. You know, he's just like, I don't have a Turbo Man. Anyone who doesn't have one's going to be a real loser. I'm like, you know what, Jamie? You know what you need for Christmas? You need some acting lessons. So go get those, and then ask me for Turbo Man again. And I'm like, I'm just picturing like that's the deleted scene, because I'm like, if Haley Joel Osment was in Jingle All the Way and he was crying about needing a Turbo Man, I would have jumped through the fucking movie screen to give him every action figure I had based on how compelling that performance is. So I'm trying to imagine a lesser actor in this performance, because yeah, there's so much going on in his head, and the character has so much stuff. And I love the fact that you guys don't dumb down your audience by spelling everything out all the time. And even upon rewatching it, I saw 50 things I didn't see the first time that I had suspected, but as upon rewatching, I'm like, oh no, I was right. And I love that. And it's kind of I don't want to say brave, but in this day and age when everybody is just flipping through phones, barely paying attention to things, a movie like a slow burn is almost like would seem like something bad, but a slow burn is actually some of the greatest movies of all time are slow burns, and they build up to something. But we live in a world where everybody wants these giant popcorn action films where something just blew up and they walk away from it feeling nothing from it. Well, there's kind of one major gunfight in this movie, but it's the gunfight, and you're waiting for it. So everything matters. Every punch, every bullet, every shot. Was it really hard to be able to put this movie together like those puzzle pieces and stay course with that vision? Because I'm sure pace wise, people must have been like, oh, are they gonna meet up and then Santa's gonna give up and come back for another final confrontation? Or basically, I'm sorry, I'm rambling so much right now, but I'm just wondering
we understand it, because there were times when we would do a note session with people and they would say, oh, I wish this, started off with a bigger action sequence, or I wish there was a big action sequence in the middle. And it was funny. I remember Mel was actually the one that kind of put it in a framework for us, because maybe we were just too inside of it at the time. But he was like, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of High Noon. And we were like, oh shit, it is kind of like High Noon, because in High Noon, you've got this bad guy and a good guy, and they're kind of just moving towards each other the entire film. And finally it pops off at the end. And I don't know why that was in our heads. It seems so simple now, but it took someone like Mel to just kind of step back and say, oh, it's got kind of a High Noon vibe to it. And we're like, holy shit, it is kind of a High Noon vibe. But yeah, I think
it wasn't conscious that we did that, which is interesting. We'd both seen High Noon and enjoyed it, but it wasn't a conscious thing that we did. I think for us, our structure kind of says we don't want to exhaust the audience with excessive gunplay, so they're just desensitized to it by the time to the end. We want it to mean something. We want them, we want it to really make an impact.
And there's a lot, like in a lot of our like pitches for this movie and our other movie, like Small Town Crime, two movies that had more action than the other movies we had. A lot of our pitching was like one of the things we say in there is the action sequences will be earned, and for us, what that means is, like Esh said, it's an action sequence that has a build up to it so that you're excited to see it. When I can't tell you how many times, look, I like John Wick. I like John Wick a lot. I think there's a point, however, while I'm watching John Wick, that if I got up and got a sandwich or something and there was explosions happening behind me, I may not spin around really quickly to try to see what was happening. I just be like, yeah, he's in a house. He's tearing up 50 people. I'm going to sit down to probably catch the last 10 of them, to have them fall down and die. And if that's okay, I'm not really that worried about it. But I like the movies more like Unforgiven, where he rides into the town at the end, or Good, the Bad, the Ugly, where there's literally like a handful of shootouts. There's like some war sequences, but those aren't really the sequences that are action. It's the tension before the action kicks off that really is what's exciting about those movies. And A Fistful of Dollars, a few dollars more, like it's the tension, it's the buildup, and you're just dying to see how they're going to sort of pull this off and who's going to come out. And hopefully by the end there, you're not quite sure if we are crazy enough to actually kill certain characters or maim certain characters, or as you've seen, as the buildup happens, it kind of starts getting darker and darker and crazier, and some characters start kind of dropping or getting hurt. And you're like, holy shit, is this really going to tip as far as I think it will? Are they going to go that fucking dark? And that's the idea. The idea is to start ratcheting it up on you so that you care and you're not quite sure and you're actually scared for the characters.
Yeah. But I do think it's interesting that we live in a time where you have a pre-trailer before the trailer. I mean, that's just bananas to me.
That is bananas.
Where you have like
what
that
the
10
fuck is wrong with people?
Like that 10-second blitz of explosions before you actually get to your 2-minute trailer. Like, I think we all got to step back and say, wait a second here, let's reset.
Well, probably the worst thing about the Blitzkrieg 10-second trailer before the trailer starts is that it's incoherent, right? Yeah. It's just a flash of images and shit happening, and maybe you get 1 or 2 lines in there, and you're like, what the fuck is that? And then you watch the 2-minute trailer, and you're like, oh, okay, maybe I would or would not watch that. So it's interesting that that's become a flavor. to draw you in some way, because it doesn't really say anything. It's just a flash of images to music. It's crazy.
But for us in this particular, the way this story rolled out, it was just what the story wanted to be for us. And
yeah.
Not to sound like we have some questions, and I would definitely want to make sure everyone gets their answers. But I will say, like, not to sound like Santa Claus in the beginning of your film, but I'm so disenfranchised with the way like some young people process information, and how they are all literally the dog from the movie Up, where they'll be like completely focused on something and they'll be like squirrel, and it's just like, sometimes patience is a virtue. And I love the movie The Hateful Eight, and it's a long movie, but holy shit does it end. And I'm trying to imagine if it was full of nonsensical action the entire time, would you even give a shit about the ending? Because you would have had to make the ending 4 times as big as the middle, because that's kind of the rule. Like you need to go here, and it's very rare that you go here and then dip down. They do that in Captain America Civil War. It does work, but they make it personal at the end, so that's how it works. But at the same time, I'm just like, I've seen so many Transformers movies and so many fucking Fast and Furious movies where nothing fucking matters. Nothing. It just goes from one scene to the other. And the amazing thing about your movie, it reminds me of this scene in Pan's Labyrinth, where it's just kind of quiet, dark, and you're kind of scared. And then this general guy just takes his gun out and breaks this guy's nose. And it's the most vicious, brutal thing you've ever seen. But it comes out of nowhere. And you're just like, Jesus Christ, what the fuck am I watching? And that kind of reminds me what happens in your movie, where some of the violence is implied, which is even better. But when the kid goes into his basement, then all of a sudden there's that girl from the science fair that he's jealous over winning, tied to a fucking chair, and you're just like, what? I thought he was getting milk from his fucking grandmother. What the hell is she doing there?
Well, I'm glad that worked for you. No, I mean, that's what we're hoping, right? That we're gonna zig left when you were expecting us to go right, and keep you guessing,
and hopefully those moments, even though they are a surprise at times, that as you do a split second mental regression, that it makes sense, and you're sort of, although you're shocked, you at least understand how we got there.
Yeah. So Jasmine, after I saw the movie, I was telling everybody who would listen, and Jasmine's part of a secret Halloween group I have. And I was just like, dude, you and your bro gotta see this. And they watched it on Christmas Day. So Jasmine said, we watched the movie as a family on Christmas Day. Really great. And Lisa says, I really appreciate the lack of big action scenes, and I'll take good writing and acting over explosions. So, it's hitting the right demographics.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's what you have to lean into with your movie, right? Is the people that it's for. And we've made a few movies, so I mean that happens with every movie you make. Even if you've made a Transformers, there's people out there that don't like Transformers movies. So you got to sort of lean into the folks that do, and that's, I mean, right? So I mean that's what you do. You make a movie and you hope it finds its audience, or you hope there are enough people there like you that like that type of film, and then you lean into it. You just we knew we were making a movie that was very specific, and you just got to hope there's enough people like you that like that type of humor, that like that type of action, that build with you. I mean, we always try to lean into the audience rather than worry about folks that didn't get it, or were it wasn't my type of movie. It's just like, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we knew we couldn't do this one by by focus group. This wasn't going to be a 15 quadrant film. It's gonna
my mom hates your movie, but she's like 60 something years old and she likes Hallmark movies, so she's not your demographic. It's all good. But I'm like, I found it funny because she didn't like The Hateful Eight either, and I'm like, yeah, that's where you and I differ, Mom. Like, I will watch 8 people in a room almost kill each other for 4 hours and then see them do, and it's amazing. Or Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, another kind of build up. Like, was Tarantino at all an inspiration in your pacing, where you kind of like were confident in that tone that people will stay there for that big ending?
I think it's impossible for him not to have been an influence on us. I mean, I can remember one of these seminal films of my life is probably, or was probably, Pulp Fiction, just because I remember coming into my best friend's brother's bedroom and he was watching it like at lunch during school, and we walk off campus for like an hour and then you come back. But I remember I was so desperate to get back to watch the rest of it because I only got to see like 25 minutes of it, but it was so exhilarating to watch. And I had no idea what was going on because I was in the middle of the movie. So yeah, I mean that, and I think Quentin said something like, at one point where didn't he say something like, I'm going to paraphrase horribly, but exactly what you just said, where he was like, it's okay if it's a slow burn. It's okay if the audience is confused, as long as they trust you and they believe in you as a filmmaker, they'll follow you. And as long as you deliver, to a certain extent, then it's okay. They'll follow you into that mist,
Yeah.
And we definitely have that ringing in our minds because there's countless movies that we have followed into the mist similarly and been rewarded for.
But I also think if you try to make a movie by the formulas, I don't necessarily think that's a recipe for success.
Well, I think there's what movies have structure or whatever. Okay, great. But then there's plenty of times where Esh and I are writing and it's like, have we seen this before?
Like every other movie's done it this way.
Yeah, and you're like, okay, well, how can we point them in that direction that we're going to do that, and then do something, subvert their expectations in a certain way to where it's still earned and still works, but it's different and catches them a little off guard. And there's plenty of times where we write a scene that we're like, oh, that's cool, that's going to work, that's going to be great. It's just like Predator or whatever, and then all of a sudden you're like, I can't do that.
So awesome.
It was in that movie. I can't do it, and you sort of have to lash yourself a little bit and get back in there and keep writing and come up with something hopefully a little bit more creative, hopefully a little bit more subverting.
But we agree with you. Predator's all time.
One of our all time.
Oh my God. Predator's fucking genius. And it all comes to kind of like practical things going wrong and compensating for it. Like, you don't see the Predator in the movie for the half of it because the suit sucked and they had to make the suit and it only got there like last minute. Yeah. So in the meantime, you get to know Arnold and the grunts so well that when they slowly start getting picked off by this thing, you're fucking bummed because it's almost like your friends are dying. And this is a hardcore action movie, popcorn flick where everyone's disposable allegedly, but they're not. And it takes good acting, good writing, and you can have the most over-the-top action movie in the world, like Aliens, and still love everyone in it. So that's I was shitting on Transformers before because my favorite Transformers movie is actually Bumblebee because it's kind of like the weakest robot, like the little engine that could, against like two others. And all the other movies, there's minimum 20. So. Who the fuck is all these other guys? Oh, that's Ratchet and Hatchback and Tape Deck and and in this one it's just like Bumblebee and those two. And it reminded me of like one of those 80s buddy like kid in a robot movies like that, like Short Circuit or Batteries Not Included or like So that's what so anyway, everyone, whoever's like saying, Transformer, I'm saying that's my piece on it. We got some questions from the audience, and I would love to ask you and answer them because they're very cool people. All right, Paul Tucker, who's from New Orleans and a great dude. He let me and my band stay at his house for a few days about a decade ago. He said, such a great movie. Here's the question. When they were writing the movie, did they have Walton Goggins and Mel Gibson in mind for the parts? It almost seemed like those two roles were custom made for these two actors, perfectly cast.
I think it's a two-part answer. So when we first wrote it 14 years ago, like we could not have foreseen those two people playing those roles, and they did an amazing job in it. When we first wrote it, we had Jack Nicholson in mind for Claus, and we had Johnny Depp in mind for the Hitman. So that was our combo then. Now at a 2016, I think it was 2016 screening of Hacksaw Ridge, we saw Mel with his beard after shooting Hacksaw, and he was in the award circuit, and he was tired. He was worn out. It was a long year. He just finished come off the movie. He'd been touring for a few weeks, if not a month or two. for the award season, and he just was kind of rolled over, but the passion was in the eyes, even though he was like physically exhausted. And we were like, that's him. Like, that's the guy. That's Chris right there. And he just happened to be, in his, getting into his 60s at that point. So he aged into it perfectly. Then same with Walton. He was not foreseen in the role. Like we were saying, we met with probably half a dozen other actors, and they all would have been great. And we were excited about all like a potential, what they were going to do from all of them. But on the day, like when we sat down with Walton, he nailed it. We were just like, yes, I want to see this version of that.
I would say that the script over the 14 years evolved.
Yeah.
And so it kind of evolved into those characters speaking to us.
Well, even in the way that you have like that character feels very Walton, it's because Walton gets in there and Waltons it. You know what I mean? Like he gets in there and says, I'd say this line like this. And hey, can we have a scene in a Chinese restaurant where I really want to do this and this and this? And then one of the other cool things was that we had a very different beginning to his character. We had another scene completely than him selling the bat, which is in there now, or buying the bat. Buying the bat. And we rewrote it because we had shot the last half of the movie first. Thank goodness, because we realized while we were doing that it was the dynamic that we had in the intro scene wasn't quite appropriate for the way Walton was playing it. So he was so alpha and in control and domineering that we were just like, there's no way he's going to be subservient to somebody. Yeah. And he was in one of the scenes. He was a little more like acquiescing to the person. We were just like, there's no way. He'd own his own business. He'd be like this, and this is how it would go. Yeah. And that spoke to us, just his performance. And we were like, okay, here's the new intro.
We also were, while we were shooting the movie, we went to the mall. We started walking up and down the mall. And we walked by some of these toy stores and like these comic book collectible shops. Yeah. And like inside those toy stores and stuff, they're like young kids working there, with and it was just like, there's no way Walton's gonna work here.
He'd be more underground. Yeah. That back alley, office that you step into and you're wondering if you're going to get shot or, beat up in the alley.
And that room that he's introduced to us in had been shown to us on a scout of this location where that's actually the location that we used for the post office. And
they just had that
room like, oh, you could set up your makeup tables in here and all this stuff. And Ian and I were just struck by those three glorious windows up there halfway high in the room and like beamings of light coming down.
And how they were silhouetting us, when we would walk in and out of them. And we were just like, man, this would be a beautiful spot for something. And then as soon as the opportunity arose for us to rewrite another scene, we were like, okay, how do we use those amazing windows in that room?
Yeah. And then we talked to the production design team and we were like, we see really something with these lights and like magnifying glasses, and he's got tools to check the authenticity and maybe like an atomizer and all this weird stuff. And so they came back with all this like, cool gack on that table.
And then Walton gets in the room and he's like, give me 5 minutes in here before we start shooting. We're like, okay. And he's like moving shit around. And then by the time we're shooting, he's Waltonized the scene. He's got the thing that he whips down and he pops it back up and then he reaches and he's got the bat and he's rolling the bat. Like, he came up with all these crazy antics, little tests his character would do to authenticate something and just be fucking strange and amazing and creepy. And that's kind of how, Walton gets into a scene and makes it his own. It's really fun to work with that guy. And it's really fun to work with Marianne and Chance and Mel all in certain different ways too, because they all have their own ways of working. Yeah. It's fun, man. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Okay. Just once again, shout out to Jason Bujo, my best friend, who insisted I see this movie. And just to note, the second I saw the movie, I went out to Walmart and I bought my own copy of it, because as soon as I connected that it was shot in Ottawa by people who have been working on this forever, after seeing that, I realized, like everybody out there, my lovely lady has an expression called buying is voting. And if you like something, the best way to let the world know you like it is definitely by picking it up. And for only $20 for a Blu-ray stacked with special features, I couldn't imagine not adding it to my collection. Now, I just want to read a little quote. I'm going to paraphrase this because I can't remember the quote exactly. But my friend Ray, I know him, and he appreciates film and he appreciates action. He appreciates good action. And I said, dude, watch this movie, Fatman. It's only $20 at Walmart. I promise you'll like it. If you don't like it, I'll buy it off you. It's all good. And he sends me a message saying, I got here. I loved every fucking minute of that movie. It is now in my top 5.
That's amazing.
And then he brings up what his other top 5 are, including The Night Before and a bunch of our movies and Reindeer Games. I'm like, I've seen everyone but Reindeer Games, dude. He's just like, people think I'm fucking crazy, but I love it. And but it's just great that, you know, your movie is that new, but it's still leaving an impression with people to make people's top 5 lists. Christmas movies have been around forever. How does it feel to know that people are connecting with this quickly and making it a part of their lives, you know, a part of their holiday traditions already? The movie has only been out for like 3 months. That's amazing.
I mean, we're so grateful and can't be thankful enough to this and everybody who's supported the film. It really has been a decade and a half journey to get on screen, and it warms our hearts that it resonates with people.
Yeah, it means a mountain to us. I mean, you make a film, and every time you make a film, anybody who makes a film, I mean, you just pray to God that there are enough people out there that are going to sync up with the vision or the thing that you want to make. And this one was so weird and crazy and nuts. It took us forever to get made, and we are, you know, really, really excited that people are enjoying it as much as we hoped they would, you know, as we dreamed they would, because it could go either way. You could love this film, you know, or you could be just, this is mom, that's just batshit crazy, you know.
And Ray is just confirming that the dynamic of Mel, Walt, and Marianne was so epic in this movie. Side note, I bought the day after Ryan told me, so I'm not lying. Haha. And he says, you guys gave us the best Santa ever. I'm like, I'm kind of an old jaded person sometimes, and I like seeing a Santa Claus that kind of loses his way, but oh my God, like, I don't want to spoil the ending because we're still in the middle of this, but just like what a character payoff, I just got to say. And it's just the way he wears the jacket from beginning to end. That's the metamorphosis that I can think of. That's like that I took for granted upon first viewing. And the second viewing, I'm like, oh my God, that's the same jacket. You wouldn't even know.
Well, one of the amazing moments about that actual moment is that Mel loves to play with his wardrobe. That's one of the things he likes to do. And he was telling us, he's like, yeah, I love to get in the actual suit that the actor has. He's like, and I like to get in front of a mirror and I like to just mess around with it for like a half hour. He's like, and just try to think of like, oh, when I'm in this scene, I'll wear it like this. And what if I did this? And the collar up, the collar down, open, jacket. He's like, I just try everything you could think of. He's like, to see what vibe I'm giving off when I feel like I'm wearing it like that. And so when he's coming out of the house, of course, he's kind of disheveled. He just threw it on. He's moving out. It's very worky. It's very blue collar. And then at the end, he was like, what if I do this? And he was playing around with it in the mirror, and he came to us. Fur trapper. Yeah. And he was like, it's like this old fur trapper. And you really get this. Like, I mean, it throws you back like 100, 200 years and throws you into possibly another continent. You're like Antarctica, you know, you're like, holy shit, this guy's riding a sled with dogs. Like, this is this whole kind of backstory as to like what that meant and how it's like getting back to basics, you know, and it just went with the theme of that scene. And he found this amazing look with that uniform that he was just like, this is it. This is what I want to go with. And we're like, fuck yeah, that looks amazing, you know?
It really did. I'm just like, oh, wow, he put the suit on, because that's why I keep saying it. I'm like, the second time I saw it, I'm like, oh, yeah, the shit. He wore it there, too. So it just goes to show. I don't know. It's almost like the powerful, like, even when you're wearing a suit, if everything's unbuttoned and ties loose, and then at the opposite, if you're standing up straight and doing this, like, it's crazy how a prop can be two different things. It could be the exact same prop, but just a little adjustment, especially mentally. And, you know, Mel Gibson's eyes are insane, and his eyes tell this entire story. When he tells the elves that the military is moving in, and the tears and repression and shame he's feeling, like, all of a sudden it's just like, oh yeah, Santa's real, and there's a fucking workshop full of elves, and this totally happens, and this is what, and this restrained, I don't know, this pain you see in his eyes and anger in other scenes, it all sells. Santa's real because of him. It's insane.
And that's
sorry for all that.
Sorry, go ahead. That scene as well was an amazing moment, because like we're very attached to that scene for a couple of reasons. It was the first scene that we really talked to Mel about, and that he gave us his take on. And it was really just undeniable. He was the guy. When we sat down with him at this little cafe in Malibu, we had like 45 minutes, and like 3.5 hours later, we walked out, you know, like we ended up spending all damn day there. And the scene that we really talked about a lot was that scene. He said, "Oh, this scene where I'd go out and I talk to the elves." We're like, yeah. He's like, I just feel like that's like the worst moment in my life, that I have to go out and tell these elves, my workers, my brothers, my family, that like I've had to sort of sell us out to the U.S. military.
Way, yeah.
Yeah. And he was like, I just think that I'll be almost in tears and barely holding it back. We're like, yeah, that's great. He's all, and I think that's what's going to make it so funny. And we're like, exactly. Like, he just got it. He got the vibe of the movie immediately. And then he was pitching us like, I see this guy as an old cowboy. We're like, yes, exactly. Yeah. I mean, he just nailed it, man. And we just, it was such a great collaboration with that guy. We could not have found a better Chris. You know, he was perfect.
I've never seen Santa cry before. All right, audience, point on the doll where Santa has ever fucking cried in 60 years of Christmas movies. Okay, let me know, because I don't recall, unless he was bullshitting in a scene to get like some kid to give their brother a train or something. Like, I don't think I've ever actually seen Santa Claus heartbroken to the extent where actual tears are formed. So that was something. Jake Gunn, the very wise Jake Gunn, says the movie's pretty self-contained, where the hints at a larger world are primarily dedicated to character backstory, which is great. But I'm curious if they have a full version of the world in their minds, things completely not mentioned or even alluded to, or does it consist mainly of these hints?
Well, I mean,
so do you,
like, yeah, I totally get it. When we first, I mean, I don't think we could have done it any other way, but for us, it's kind of an outside in. So we build the whole thing out in our minds. We build the whole thing out on paper at times. And Eshom, thank God, is a wonderful storyboard artist, an artist. And so he would literally draw entire rooms out, and we'd only be shooting into a corner of it for certain scenes, you know, or have the whole factory kind of planned out. He walks down the ramp here, and then we walk around. The boiler room's over here. Like, the whole thing is literally like, he goes in this door and that, it leads to the boiler room, which wraps around to this and then circles back into I mean, there's a topographical map that Esh drew how the
really
actually worked.
You gotta have it
because you have to have that blueprint of what you're shooting.
Yeah.
You're just like, whatever, he walks in a door, he turns a corner, he's there. You know, it's ridiculous. It doesn't quite work. So we had him like go down the ramp. Skinny man makes a right into these doors, which wraps around into these double doors. We had this whole map of how it actually worked and functioned. And of course, you only shoot a fraction of that. But for us, I don't know how to do it any other way. And the same backstory and the legend, like, I mean, we had like we were saying, like, we wrote 2 short stories, and one of them dealt with the whole prequel, how he became Santa, and how we got to this point, and
which is
let's hope we get a number 2 to explain that with everybody.
Okay,
but that was the 2 movies we were kind of weighing, was like, okay, do we tell the origin story, or do we tell a story now with hints to the origin story? And we got budgets. Budget is kind of the biggest thing. It's like, okay, you can make the $20 or $30 million version with a prequel, because everything's period and everything. Like, it's just a lot to build an entire town. To scale to period. Whereas you just drop in the middle and you can use all these existing locations to just kind of gussy a few up, you know. It's a lot different. But yeah, we have it all built out. It's literally just, you know, what you're seeing and what we're sort of sprinkling is totally on purpose. And I think there's times where we give you enough, is how we like to sort of function in our movies. We try to give you enough. If there's something that we feel like you need to know, we give it to you. If there's something that's extraneous, you kind of have to pull it away, because there's not really time to explore it. And it opens up so many more, you know, it opens up so many more questions at times that you would have to digress and go down. Maybe we'll do a flashback. You just don't have time
feel like
for
exposition.
That. Yeah, we don't want it to feel like exposition either, where he's like, you know, when I became Santa, you know, like, you can't do that. And then there wasn't really time or a place to do a flashback up to like when he became Santa or whatever. So we give you enough and we hint at it. And try to keep moving, because we really are trying to tell a very progressive story in this one. Whereas I think the next one, I mean, we're talking about it right now, structure and what exactly we want to show. But yeah, with the next one, we're hoping to dive a little more into that.
Oh, for sure. And you know what? It's kind of better that you didn't just kick it in and it not matter, because it would have seemed disjointed, that flashbacks out of nowhere. Because flashbacks are a very it's not the easiest thing to do. It could be kind of like that corny thing that can take you out of a serious moment, and like you feel disjointed from the timeline you're actually following, because the flashbacks makes me think of Wayne's World, where they're like diddle-doo, 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 diddle-doo. And that must be stylistically a little hard. Like, what does the flashback look like? I've seen movies that do it beautifully, but I've seen movies that do it wrong. So I'm kind of glad that like you pick your battles, and you guys pick the right battles to do, because I think that's what works about this movie the most, is that I never thought, like, it's a surreal movie, but I always bought everything. And I love the sprinkles you put in, where there's this great edit where you're like, one of the elves is like, oh yeah, it's the giving that keeps them young. And then all of a sudden Santa Claus is punching the shit out of a fucking bag. Just bang, 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 bang. And now it's a little late, and we've been at this a while. I will get into a little bit of the details, in which Santa Claus has pretty much told his wife at this point that he just is, he doesn't believe in anything anymore. He just did another Christmas Eve, whatever. Someone shot him. Someone shot him in the side, and he's just like, it'll heal the way it usually does. A little bit of a hint. But Santa Claus is strong, and they keep showing you Santa Claus is strong. But then Mrs. Claus comes in and shows him kind of like before and after pictures of a little girl receiving a fire truck when she's a kid, paired up with a modern photo of a firefighter saluting, a full-grown woman firefighting. I wanted to know personally, now that we're talking a little bit more details, we've been talking a little while. By the way, thanks again for doing the show, guys. That's fucking amazing
Thank you.
that you're doing this. I want to know, does Santa Claus kind of like, is the magic of his toys, can he kind of tell what kids are going to be when they grow up? Like, is there a connection to what they get as a kid? Because Skinny Man got a cop car when he was a little kid, before he gave up on trying to be a good kid based on his family. Was Santa Claus kind of insinuating, hey, if you grow up and you live your life right, you'll probably be a police officer? Hence why
so
he's,
exactly. Yeah. So Chris sort of can guide these kids towards something that they naturally have a tendency towards, or something that
they're adept to. Yeah. And that was one of the really fun things about building up that Skinny Man character and playing with that theme, or that run through the film of like, oh, this is a lot of fun, that we're showing that he's not just giving gifts to be like benevolent. I mean, that's part of it, but it's also, there's a reason for it. He's trying to help these children find
their calling,
or what they're going to do for their lives, or how they can be helpful to others, or what they have the best propensity toward. And the other half of that is with the Skinny Man is, yes, he's supposed to be he should have been a cop, which is kind of awesome to think about, because he ended up on the opposite side of that. But one of the other things we were able to do was one of the car that he drives is the exact same model of that Hot Wheel, which is fucking awesome. We were able to do that. Yeah, that same car. It's the same car. So you're kind of like, not only did he end up in the same car, but it just doesn't have sirens on it, but it's also painted black like a death wraith. You know what I mean? He's kind of fulfilled who he should have been, but on a mirror side of it, Yeah,
we had a lot of discussions about that car, and that Monaco stood out for us also because of, we could tie the story into it, and we had a matching Hot Wheel, also it's the car that the T-800 drives in the original Terminator. So we were like, we'll just black it out. It'll be so.
Awesome. I'm really glad you said that, because the scene in which and Skinny Man, he has this obsession with Santa Claus ever since he started getting cool. He's buying people's Christmas presents from people, and there's that certification on each and every Santa Claus thing made in Santa's workshop. And a gentleman sells him a bat for a considerably large amount of money. I mean, for a baseball bat he got when he was 11, like $800. In your world and lore, does gifts from Santa Claus, are they kind of like a resale? Do people not usually sell gifts that are given to them by Santa Claus?
Yeah, that's it, right? I mean, for that particular character, like, he went on to have a baseball career, right? Which was unfortunately through an injury he lost and became disenchanted with the sport. But that's it, right? They have a higher value, they're collectibles, and like that, like we were saying, they're kind of your guiding lights.
And that was kind of the fun thing, right? I mean, I think there's times where, like, that was one of the fun things to think about is like, okay, this guy he got a bat from Santa because he has a propensity towards baseball, or he can be a great baseball player, and he ends up getting hurt,
or a coach or whatever.
Yeah, but the other side of that is maybe he coaches his son to be the best pitcher ever, or he helps influences another child. Like, you never know what that gift that he has down the line, whether he gets hurt or not on the field, is going to be giving something positive to somebody else. You know?
And so for us, that was Skinny Man, like stealing other people's dreams, collecting them, right?
And
hoarding them.
And because, not just because he didn't get them. I mean, that's absolutely part of it, but
and vindictive in
because
nature. He's
vindictive, because he has a giant hole to fill that will never be filled. He's just constantly, and one of the things that we did in the film that leads into that theme as well is that every time he goes in somewhere and buys a bunch of stuff, I mean, he buys a shitload of stuff. And it's like we were kind of trying to lean into this thing of like, he's trying to buy his soul. He's trying to fill himself with things to buy. And I think everybody gets that moment. You're like, I'm going to go buy a couple of DVDs, and you end up with like 50 of them. And you're just like, holy shit, am I ever even going to have enough time to watch these fucking DVDs? Did I even need another copy of Lethal Weapon? I already got a DVD. Did I need a Blu-ray?
Definitely needed one.
I mean, there's times where we just do that, and you just kind of get carried away. And I think that Skinny Man lives his entire life like that he's constantly trying to fill this hole that he has by buying things, like when he comes out of that after buying the coat, he didn't just buy a coat. He's got fucking skis. He's got a new bag. He's got everything. Boots. It's everything in the kitchen sink.
I was looking over some of my notes in my rewatch today, and I gotta say, like, the music is awesome. Like the opening score, it gives you that Western feel, but at the same time, feels very Christmas. Tell me about the music, the composer, and how you went about scoring the film, because the music in it is awesome. You mentioned you like Tarantino. Feels very Tarantino sometimes, and what he would put in a Kill Bill movie, like Kill Bill 2, let's say.
I mean, that score was done by the Mondo boys, Mike G and Mike S, and we were so fortunate to find those gents. So that opening track that you described, that's over the house, was literally their audition track they sent us. And so they watched the movie, and we had a conversation with them, and they're like, it's got a little Western, it's got a little Christmas, it's got a little all this stuff. And we're like, yeah, it's going to be, it's a difficult needle to thread, right? With each character has their own musical sonic motif going throughout the film. And they're like, okay, well, let us go. Like, I really think we got to embody all of those tones in the open. And so we're like, well, good luck, right? Because that's what we'd been searching for. And temp tracks hadn't quite done it.
And that was one of the frustrating things, is that we put all these temp tracks in the film, but they worked. Like, there were a couple of them that were like, okay, this one would work great. It's Ennio Morricone, fucking famous, but will never get track, and it works perfect. So how the hell are we going to find anything that even matches that or gets close to it and feel like its own thing? Because you don't want people just in there ripping off Ennio Morricone. That doesn't fucking work. And then the other side of it was like, it's also got to have another dynamic to it, because it's not just a straight Western. So they had that whole techno vibe that they kind of filled out the Skinny Man's character with. But as the synthy stuff, right? But the synthy stuff. But as soon as you meld in with Chris's world, it turns into kind of a synth, crashes into Western, which turns into a full blown Western once they get out into that firefight, and then turns into just like weird percussion right before they start to actually fight. So I don't know. They had a lot of fun and were really creative with a lot of their choices. And thank goodness, man, they not only, met, but exceeded our expectations with a lot of them, because we couldn't find temp tracks to even do what we were hoping to do, because there aren't a lot of movies that mesh that much stuff and try to get everything kind of, we didn't have anything. We didn't have a template.
We didn't have any comps.
We didn't have anything
we had sort of an amalgam of different source tracks.
It felt like a hodgepodge quilt of music when we had all our comps in there, but you just don't have anything. You have to do that. So it was really great to find those guys, and they were able to sort of straddle genre and tone and just crush it. They did a great job.
Yeah. Paul Tucker, who Paul, if you rewatch this later about the 50-minute mark, that's when I asked your question. So Paul, since you're here right now, if you have another question, the boys are here. Please ask another one, because Paul Tucker is a great dude, great singer, and his band Joystick rule. So another question I had for you guys. Oh, there he is. Awesome. Okay, so another question I had for you guys is that, I at this point, everybody watching right now, I'm pretty sure has confident that they have seen that. We don't have to go into massive detail about the ending, but that character shift. You at one point you really think Santa's gone, but he's not. And the next time you see him, there's a look in his eye that you have not seen in the entire film. And when he walks into the office, and you think he's gone, and Mrs. Claus is there, and you're like, oh, here she is to tell him, like, look what you done. I'm going to wear the coat now. But no, he lived through this, and the look he has in his eyes, that is the scariest Gibson I have seen since Lethal Weapon 1. Like, that is full rig psychotic rage, except more contained. Tell me about putting that scene together, talking to Mel, and just coming up with the Santa performance that I'll take to my grave. It's that part.
Well, I think that's that scene. You know, there was a lot of hinging on it, right? Because it's his transformation and being very proactive. Consequently, that was the very first scene that Chance had to shoot on the movie. So imagine coming in
day one, your first scene you ever shoot, and it's with Mel Gibson in that moment. Like which I think is just a testament to how good that kid is. Because I mean, you know, for him to put himself into where he would be at the end of the film after all that and all the baggage he's carrying, it was a lot. He did a killer job.
And I just remember Chance bubbling over with enthusiasm when Mel walked, because Mel was not showing him the whole thing, and then he walks in and does a take, and Chance, we call cut, and Chance, that was awesome. Like, oh, terrifying right now. And it's the magic, right? It's Mel embodying that character and embracing the injury and choreographing it with camera. Our DP Johnny Durango, like, lighting it perfectly where he moves just into the light and out of the light. There's so many collaborators that have to come in and make it all sing. It's really a blessing.
And I do remember, like, what mental notes or what we were talking with him about before he went into that scene. And of course, as we mentioned earlier, like, he does his homework and he really works hard on trying to figure out even, like, what is his color going to be, up or down in a scene. Like, he really goes, that's why he's so great, I think, is that he really goes down to the buttons on the jacket of, like, how everything's going to be portrayed when he walks in the room, how he feels that he should be playing it. But I do remember, as far as the character in that moment, in that we had this idea that him getting back to basics, or him getting back to one with himself, where he felt like he was, going to be able to sort of scare this kid straight, or what mentality he was going to have. I just remember discussing, one, when Ash and I first wrote it, and two, when we were talking to Mel, we were talking to him about what we were discussing. But it was there's a weird sordid lore with Santa, right? In that their Coca-Cola Santa, wears these bright red jackets, and he runs around handing around Coca-Colas and bright presents to people and hanging out with polar bears. But the Germanic, or Nordic Santa of, yesterlore,
legacy Santa.
Yeah. Like, he was some cross between Krampus and Santa, and he had there were these weird stories that we were reading about while we were writing it, that people would actually use Father Christmas or Father Winter or whatever the hell they were calling him, and there was a mix of them.
They almost terrorize their kids straight.
They would scare them straight and say, well, if you're not good, he's going to come and get you in the middle of the night. If you're not good, Santa will come get you.
He was almost like a ghoul.
Yeah, he was almost like a threat to kids back, 500 years ago. It was like, hey, if you're not good, Santa's going to snatch you from your bed in the middle of the night kind of feel. And
or he's going to shower you. Yes.
Or he's going to give you a nice little pine cone with some squirrels on it.
Being a polar opposites.
And we were like, I love
Santa's bipolar.
Yeah, exactly. And we love that. And that's exactly what we wanted to feel out of him, to be in that last scene. And I'm sure, Mel was doing his own thing, because it feels like a weird cross between, that character and, like, an amazing, like, Shakespearean performance, really. And he comes in and he just delivers. And I remember even Mel talking about, like, working with an eye patch, and he was like, when you work with an eye patch, it's all in the other eye. Like, I remember, it's a lot of this, he was cracking up. was cracking us up with just sort of the idea behind a lot of the physicalities he was doing, which were working. I mean, they were terrifying us. They were terrifying Chance. It was just really powerful.
But when we were also excited to portray another gear that Chris has.
Yeah.
You know? And this is something we hadn't seen before. And that, you know, but we all, you know, this isn't how he is all the time, but this is something that
he can turn it to 11 if he needs to, you know, to get it done.
Yeah. And that is great, because I will like literally say, like, my darling girlfriend, we've been together almost 10 years. She came in halfway through, and you know, she came in about halfway through and was instantly kind of drawn in. And I filled her in about the beginning, but we were both really taken with that last scene. And I got to say, like, I've shown her Krampus. I've shown her this really cool movie called Rare Exports that comes. I think it's from Finland, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So Rare Exports is awesome. Krampus is awesome, but there are all these scarier portrayals of Santa Claus, like Silent Night, Deadly Night. If you want to go with the one with Goldberg, Santa's Sleigh, I don't think I've ever been actually scared of any of those people, but I was scared of Gibson in that one moment where he's just like, and if your grandmother dies sooner than she should, I will come for you in the night. And you're just like, that's true. He sees you when you're sleeping. That's scary as shit. It's true. It is true. Everybody out there. Yeah. Oh, well, Elisa says, loves Rare Exports. It's true. If anybody out there right now has any questions for the boys, I've been chatting them up all night. Make sure you get there, because I don't want to hold them on the internet here forever. But I will say this, guys. Thank you very much for coming on the show, because Montreal, as I was telling you before, we're in kind of a weird place where we're all grown-ass men and women, but we're being told to not leave our houses past 8 p.m. And, you know, we're all trying to do our thing. This is to help out the hospital workers and all that kind of stuff. But it's kind of funny when when you're told not to do something, all of a sudden outside in -25 weather seems so fun, and we're so bummed that we can't go outside. But then I remember, guys, it's January. It's fucking freezing. Like we're not going outside anyway. But we do need to keep ourselves entertained. And a great way to keep yourself entertained, everybody, is by buying Fatman on Blu-ray. I believe is it a Walmart exclusive? Or is it available pretty much everywhere?
I mean, you guys are up in Canada and Montreal, and I don't know what the rights or what the distribution plan is up there. It's not down here, but it hasn't even come out on Blu-ray down here in the States yet. It comes out on the 26th. What?
Yeah.
Yep, comes out on the 26th. But in Canada, you guys got a little early, man.
Yeah, holy fucking shit. Are you fucking kidding me? That we've had access to this Blu-ray months before Americans? You have any idea how Twilight Zone that shit is? It's usually you guys put something out and we're waiting by the mailbox to get a little piece of it. And are you telling me that we got the goods first? That's insane.
I know. I'm glad they got the special features on there. One of the things we were worried about, because I remember we heard you guys were getting it early. Paramount is distributing it down here, the Blu-ray, and then they were like, hey, we want to get all these extra on here like you guys want, and it's going to take us, for quality control, we want to make sure we have this as great as possible. So we're going to be releasing it late January. And we're like, okay, well, as long as everything's on there and it's great, we're great.
Apparently the replicators up north work faster.
The Canadians got those elves on them. You guys are dominating.
Well, we have Damien,
Yeah, you do. Yeah,
we have Damien. So just some comments from the guys. Paul Tucker says, lucky I rented it. Like I said, I'm not sure, Paul, if you're still in New Orleans. Once again, thanks for letting me and my smelly band stay in your house for like 3 days. You're very nice. Ray says, no question, but what a fantastic movie. Gentlemen, congrats. Elisa says, sequel with a question mark. What's next? I mean, I know you guys are thinking about it, but is there any kind of inkling that this, it's not just more than a thought, but an actual Christmas wish come true?
Absolutely. We've already checked in with, our lead actors, and they're all down and excited to do another one. We're excited to do another one. Our distributor, our producers are all excited to do another one and moving forward with it. And now it's literally just a discussion on logistics, which is basically scheduling and timing and making sure everybody, is free at certain times, because, Mel's a busy man. Marianne's a busy woman. Unfortunately, Walton
won't be there.
Yeah. Walton didn't make it, but we're excited to do another. Everyone's excited to do another one. It's just literally like, okay, when can we all get the band back together and get back out there?
Yeah.
It's kind of what's up in the air right now.
Well, speaking of Christmas miracles, you guys managed to shoot this right before things got really fucked up. Because if you were shooting it last winter is kind of like when the world changed forever. And I'm told by Damien that you guys kind of just finished right before things got considerably different.
Yeah,
but by the skin of our teeth is what I would say. And go ahead.
I think the whole last week. Sorry, I think the whole last week was literally like, the air raid sirens going off, because every day for the last week of our shooting schedule, they were saying, we're probably gonna have to shut it down. We're probably gonna have to shut it down. All productions are gonna get shut down. And we were just like, oh my God, like we have to get as much of this shot as possible, because if we miss a day, we're not going to have the time or money to come back and pick it up, because we knew we were set to release for this Christmas, that coming Christmas. So there was no turning back. So we were just shooting our asses off, trying to get as much as we could in the can. And I remember when the last day, they were like, we might have to shut it down today. We're like, oh my God, let's just try to get past lunch, and try to get as much as we can. And I remember at the very end, we wrapped. We're like, oh my God, okay, thank God. And then the next morning, we really woke up the next morning, they were like, all productions are shut down. We're closing this sucker up.
Yeah.
And we flew back, 36 hours later.
Yeah, so one day, the next day they shut down.
Next day, we're probably 12 hours away or 8 hours away from when it was closed.
There would have been no going back. So whatever we didn't get would have been gone, because we didn't have enough to come back.
And it was scenes in Billy's house that we were finishing on. So
oh my God.
It could have been missing some legs and arms and fingers and toes, but
key Billy moments. But the movie gods were on our side.
Exactly, we really lucked out. We felt incredibly fortunate.
And then we came back here and we edited in my brother's basement.
This humble dwelling behind me.
That's absolutely insane. You guys have been very active on YouTube about the making of the movie, and people can actually see videos by you guys personally showing some of your process. Can you tell everybody how to see all these videos that you guys have been making about the making of FATMAN and all these beautiful behind the scenes featurettes?
I believe if you go on YouTube and type in, I think on nelmsbros.com, or are they under Folly Films? If you can give me 2 seconds, I can actually figure that out.
But it sure links through our website, nelmsbros.com.
That's a great way to find it, is if you go to our website, which is nelmsbros.com. There'll be some links to it in there. But let me just make sure.
And then I'm sure they're coming up on our Facebook, Nelms Bros.
Yep, right there. I see some interviews. Oh no, those aren't them. I'm sorry, those are interviews with other people. Let me think here.
I hate to say this, but we don't put that directly into the YouTube. We don't populate that.
It might be on Folly Films. Let me try that one.
Okay.
Channel. Sorry.
Yeah. So
no,
it's all good. Really glad that. I'm really glad that you guys are open to exploring this myth more, because in a sequel, Chris's turn at the end will be who he is in the next film, or if you do a prequel, we're gonna get some of the senses of the mysteries that we're all completely in love with and involved in. You can't really, as a fan of this movie, I don't see how a sequel can lose me at all, because there's information I want and there's more of Chris that I want to see. So that's actually, the way you ended that first movie is beautifully to set up that world and to be curious, because I don't think I would see the second movie and being like, oh my God, they should have just ended with the first one. It's like, no, me and the fans of this movie are just kind of like, please God, make more of this. and that must be really nice to hear, because I see your social media and I'm not the only one that says that.
Yeah, that's been awesome. It really has. And I mean, it's also been really fun to see where a lot of the fans think that we're going, or they want us to go, or some of the fun things that, they just make up and have fun with. It's fun to toss those around. It's been a lot of fun. Yeah, I mean, I'm very excited to say that what we have planned and what we had in our noggins is totally different from what anybody's thinking. So I'm excited about that as well, because again, we've sort of led you in a direction and subverted your expectations. And once we unveil what we had planned, it's going to be hopefully a surprise and a happy one.
I think as long as it's not Chris and his wife discover that they've been in purgatory the entire time, and
damn it, no.
I'm pretty sure if you don't end like that, you'll be okay.
It was just a dream, and they wake up, and then
or that Mrs. Claus already met your mother and it's Robin. Like, I'm pretty sure if you don't do that, it won't piss anybody off. It's okay. Or if you don't.
So far we're good. So far.
Or if you don't, or if the last frame of the movie doesn't like happen mid-frame like The Soprano. I'm just bringing up the terrible endings of television series, whatever. Guys, I believe that's the end of the show. Well, unless anybody else wants to ask any more questions, I do not. I feel so happy that you spent this much time talking to me, but not only me, to the audience tonight and the fans of this movie, because frankly, this is a very strange year. And I think on behalf of me and everybody else who watched this film, I think we kind of needed this film this Christmas, and I'd like to thank you personally for making it, because, it's not easy to make a Christmas classic. Many have tried and many have failed, but you guys seem to have done so. Before we leave tonight, I would like to know, what are your favorite Christmas movies / maybe Christmas action movies? But what are the favorite Christmas movies without the punching, and what are favorite Christmas movies with the punching?
I personally like Gremlins.
Nice.
I'm a big fan of Lethal Weapon. It's probably one of my favorite ones. I didn't realize that this one even really fit in until everyone was giving their alternative Christmas classics this year, and I was like, oh shit, that fits in there as well. But it's another Shane Black. Long Kiss Goodnight, which I really enjoy.
Yeah. There's some great ones.
And I mean, Rare Exports is another great one. That one's so fun and offbeat and catches you by surprise a few times. It's really fun. I really enjoyed that one a lot too.
I love one of my favorite ones of the last few years, maybe 5 years, was Krampus, with the director of Trick or Treat, because it kind of took everything I liked about Gremlins and about National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation and kind of like, took the obnoxious relatives and that kind of like us against these scary supernatural type toys that are smaller than us but yet can kill us. I really like that. Guys, this is awesome. Thank you so much, everyone.
Ryan, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you all man.
So much for joining us tonight. It really means a mountain to us. We're eternally grateful.
Yeah, and you know where to find us. I mean, if you don't, we're on Twitter and Facebook, and it's really us back there.
And then was it Paul that gave you the Blu-ray?
It was Jason.
Thank you, Jay.
Jason, thank you so much for passing that Blu-ray to Ryan.
Yeah, thanks, man. I mean, I think that's how a lot of the movies we love were passed to us. It was friends watching them or happened to watch them and said, hey man, you got to see this. And I mean, there's countless movies like that. Predator might be one of them. But there's countless movies that we were introduced to by word of mouth, which I think it's one of the strongest ones, because you don't really know if something's going to be good or if it might be on your palate.
Yeah.
Until someone you trust or someone you enjoy movies with, sort of gives you a nod and says you should check this out. So thank you for all the word of mouth out there, guys. It's exciting.
It's really what makes it all possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I bought the Blu-ray and I called a friend. I'm just like, I'm lending you this. I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit if you want to watch it or not. You got to see this before Christmas is done.
You like the Blu-ray, Ryan. And those are delicate, revered pieces of art.
You may as well been giving them your
that's a delicate surface on that disc. Whew.
Yeah, but well, just to say, everybody, if you do buy this Blu-ray, it's not just nothing pisses me off more than when you buy a movie and it's like the special edition. It comes with a trailer. It's like, what the fuck? That's not a special feature. But it's like, you guys have commentaries. You guys have commentaries. You have deleted scenes. You have a beautiful making of featurette. You have interviews with the actors. I mean, seeing Mel Gibson. My sorry to keep you guys on. I just definitely am just trying to push some discs here. You know, effortlessly because it's good. But something I noticed, like in the making of, where Mel Gibson actually, said, I have some notes on, on the edits. Would you like them? And you're going to like, yeah, the guy who directed Braveheart wants to give us some notes. Yes, we want some fucking notes. So how different did was the film at like the film's always molding, it's always changing and stuff like that. This happens day by day. I'm an editor by trade and definitely know that. You edit the movie until you give it away, and then you George Lucas and you edit in your brain and you try, and then eventually you make edits that no one wants anymore 20 years later. But back then you're editing until you give it away. Did Mel have any impact on the final tone, you could say?
No, I mean, when we here's how it went down.
Yeah.
Like, we finished our edit and we gave it to him. You would say the director's edit. We gave it to him and we were like,
this is an edit that we refine and distilled down through our own testing process.
And the way we like to test it is, just to give you an idea, and you're an editor, so maybe you'll find this interesting, Ryan.
Yeah.
Is, like, what we like to do is we probably do 20 to 30, 5 to 10 people screenings. So screenings, and you do 20 to 30 of them because at first, for maybe the first 10, you're really asking questions or trying to get feedback on some pretty big notes. It's like, hey, is this arc working, or is this character's arc working, or is this backstory working, or are you invested in this or that? And then pretty soon you get down to the minutia where you're like, hey, did this one line help you get to this point in the third act better and really pay off for you? And you're doing that throughout these 30 screenings. But yeah, we're just honing it. And we do that for, let's say, 3.5 months.
But you're also listening, because and that's the biggest part of it, is that we have a questionnaire and it's like 10 pages deep or whatever it might be. But we'll do, and then after we get done with the questions, we'll sit down with them for about an hour, and this is 5 to 10 people, and you'll start to see, we're looking for the mean, right? Because we're all individuals. We're all going to have our own subjective point of views. But when you start hearing one or two things pop up on 3 or 4 cards, you're like, that's where we have to address something. And
or sometimes the note, what's the note behind the note, right? Yeah. A lot of times you'll see 4 or 5 different, and it takes a lot of screenings to figure this out, these note behind the notes sometimes, because they'll say something like, oh, I didn't like that character. Let's say it's something that broad. I didn't like this character. And you're like, well, why didn't they like that character? And then 10 screenings later, someone's like, man, he says that line. That guy says that line in the first act. And you're just like, fuck that guy, and then you're like, oh shit, it was that line. And maybe let's try to rework that line and figure out why that turned people off or whatever, or what we can, add to it or take away from it and still get what we need story-wise and character-wise, but is it turning people off to him or her? And you just start trying to find those little notes behind the notes as you go through it. But when we came to Mel, we had gone through that process and we said, hey, here's the film. We'd love to get your feedback, your thoughts. He watched it one time and he called us and he was like texting us a little bit live while he was doing it. He's like, I'm 30 minutes in. I'm laughing my ass off.
He did a screening with his girlfriend, his daughter, his housekeeper, and another friend. Yeah, like 6 people.
And so he had a little group there, because I'm sure he's a little biased on what he would like and dislike about it. So he had a little group there. He watched it with 6 people, and he said we all loved it and we were laughing, and we chatted about a half hour afterwards about this and that nuance or whatever we were excited about. He's like, which is for us was like a dream call. It's ridiculous. And he's like, I'm happy with it. I'm happy to run with it. If you guys want to just go with it, I feel really good about everything that's in there. I don't have a note. And we're like, really? You don't have a note? And he's like, well, let me watch it once. I mean, you guys want me to watch it a couple more times and really dial in? And we're like, will you do that? He's all, hell yes, if you want me to. We're like, absolutely, please, yeah. So he watched it a couple more times, and then he called us a day later, and he was like, okay, I've watched it 3 more times. He's like, I've got some notes. Do you mind if I just come over?
And it was interesting too, because Mel was like, people really shouldn't be giving you notes unless they've watched the movie 3 times. Yeah. Like, wow. Like, okay, that's an interesting benchmark.
Yeah. And so he said, do you mind if I come over? And we're like, no, please come over. So he came over to my basement, and as it would happen, he'd actually got COVID right after the shoot in like April, and so was already testing positive for antibodies, which was just convenient.
Yeah.
So
he got the antibodies. Come on over, brother. Let's go.
Rolled over, was hanging out in our basement for about 10 hours that day, and we just went through every scene in the film, and he was just like, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? And there were times where he would say, what if we just cut straight from this to this? And let's try that. And we would do it. And we're like, oh, that's awesome. Great. And then there's times where he'd be like, what do you think about this? Let's try this, this, and this. And we'd try something for about a half hour. And then he'd be like, fuck it. I fucked it up. Let's go back to what you had. You know, we were just trying stuff, and he was just brainstorming with it. We were going through it. And I think we actually cut like 5 minutes out of it from when he came in and went through the film with us for 10 hours. We cut 5 minutes out of it. And I think we put 1 or 2 things back. And he was like, live with this for like 24, 48 hours. Watch it a couple more times. He's like, he's like, you'll need to watch this a few times before, if you know if some of these cuts we made work. He's like, some of these, like, of course, we're both like, yeah, that was great. That made it quicker and it doesn't, whatever. So like, yeah, a lot of these work great, but some of them you're going to want to live with. And he was right. Cause you know, there was 2 of them we changed back. We're just like, shit, we need that moment.
What was really great was that he said as he left, he goes, hey, I like the movie the way it was, guys. So if you want to take it all back to your original cut, like, it's good.
And what's great about that is not only did, you know, the guy like the film and you're pumped about it, is that he takes all the pressure off of those notes he just gave you and that you just did. So you can really take an objective run at them, and you're not like, he's going to be pissed if I put that back or cut that or add that back in. You're just kind of like watching it and being like, is it better? Or is it just longer with that other piece in there? Or is it worse? Or is it just shorter? You know? Yeah. And you really just take an objective look at it for the next 2 or 3 days and show it to people again. And again, we tested it with more people, and no one seemed to be missing the pieces that we'd left out or even noticing at times. And that's when you really know that you could have lost it if people had watched it once or twice, don't even notice that it's gone. Or there's times where it's just a shot that we really loved that we just felt like we wanted in there because it was a cool fucking shot. And, you know, there's times where Mel would say that. He's like, this is a really fucking cool shot. So he's like, if you want to keep it in there, keep it in there, because I think it's a really cool shot. But you could lose it. You could lose it, you know, if you feel like it's running 5 seconds too slow here. Yeah, it was just stuff like that. And by the end of it, we cut about 5 minutes, and we were really happy with it. Really happy with it.
That must be so hard to be directors and editors like at the same time, because sometimes when you give footage to an editor, you know, they're looking at everything fresh and they'll be like, oh, well, yeah, that scene doesn't really work. And then as directors, they're like, yeah, but that took 9.5 hours to do in negative 40-degree weather. And, you know, we lost an elf during that. And, you know, we have to keep that in. And, you know, you have that memory of the shot, but the editor's like, yeah, but there's a folding chair in the background, and, you know, well, one person's shoe fell off. Like, this scene takes you out of it. So it must be really hard to separate, like, you know, the storyteller part and the filmmaker part, and, you know, the writers. You're writing, directing, and editing, to balance all that and to look at everything as biasly as possible for the betterment of the production. That must be very hard to juggle.
For us, there's 3 different legs of the journey, right? And we enjoy every one of them. We enjoy the writing. For us, that's the foundation. That's a paramount important part.
Blueprint. You need
of the process. The fervor and the tenacity of producing them, you know, and getting it made. And then when you circle back to the editing, it feels a lot like writing in a sense. You know, you're getting the scenes. Ian and I, you know, we set up 2 dueling editing stations, and we'll get a scene edited, and they'll be like, hey, come and look at this, and get in the chair and do your tweaks, and then I'll go do the same for his scenes, you know, and like we'll just break it up. Like, okay, you're gonna do 1 through 5, and I'll do 6 through 10, and we slapping all that stuff together. It's truly fun because, you know, sit there and it's storyboarded out, but, you know, he's using his creative mind and he's assembling it in a little bit different way than the boards were, and I'm sure I'm providing the same surprises for him. So I don't know. It's just every leg of the process is different, and we find ways to appreciate each one of them. And I think as far as the objectivity, I don't know. Like, I feel like at the end of it, you just want, like, for us, we just want the best movie. So we're not precious about anything, right? If a scene comes on and it face plants and we spend a lot of time on it, I mean, that's unfortunate. But it's just part of the process, and you can't get too caught up in that kind of stuff.
I will say what happens in that regard for us, and maybe it would happen quicker, Ryan, if in your process, since let's say you didn't write or direct it and you're just coming in as swinging in as the editor and you're like, hey, let's try this without it. That probably happens slower for us because there are some things that we're like really excited about, and we'll spend a shitload of time like trying to fix the scene rather than just lose it. And that happens. And I'll tell you, in the movie, like one of those ones was that pet shop scene. The pet shop scene where Skinny Man goes in there and then has those great kind of outlines. And you learn a little bit about his mother to a certain extent. But that scene was on the chopping block for a while, and we had to massage it for a couple different reasons. But everybody was great in it. We thought all the information was playing, but it was running a little bit slow at that point, and you could have chopped it. And then the scene wasn't quite ending the way we wanted it to. And then we kind of finally found the end of it. And got it playing a little quicker. I think we knocked like 45 seconds out of it compared to what we had in the beginning of it. But that process is probably a little bit slower, but I think we get to where we would have gotten if we did have another editor in there. It just takes a few weeks longer because we are a little more like, we put this in here for this reason. Like, let's really try to get it to work. And a lot of the times, like sometimes it's an additive process, right? Because you can cut a scene down so much at times, and you can cut it to death and it doesn't work anymore. Or maybe even started with it being too slim and people are like, you don't need that scene. And then you add another information or a line or two that was in there that wasn't in there. And then people are like, I love that scene. That's like my favorite scene. You wouldn't cut that. Why would you cut that? And we're like, oh shit, should have left it a little fatter to begin with, you know? So yeah, it takes a little longer probably, but because there are scenes that we're excited to save or trying to save for certain reasons. Or
I mean, there's also one thing that we do where, you know, you make your selects on the day, right? You're like, okay, and we like that one. And Mark take, 5 and 4 or whatever it is. But for us, like, that's what we thought on the day of shooting it.
It's probably 50% about what you're going to say.
But when we get into editing, all like, and not to the scripting, like all those notes, we just take them out and throw them in the trash. Like, we don't want to know what we thought was a good take a month and a half ago. We want to know what we think is a good take right now.
Or like what we think is a good take in the way that the film is unspooling. Because Ryan, I'm sure as you know, like what you had in your head is how it was going to spool and what feel or tone, or it can shift as you start to put the film together and you get to a certain scene and you're like, shit, I wish it was I need something a little more down here, or I need something a little more energy here. And thank goodness, people like Walton and Mel are giving you some alts.
Good spectrum.
Yeah, they give you a little more energy, and maybe we'll bring this down because maybe this will be a sentimental moment.
And then we'll do that too. Like we'll go in there and we'll go, okay, we'll go bananas. Okay, do it this way. Now
let's bring one down because maybe this could be a great.
Because what's the point in having 15 takes that are all the same?
Yeah.
Like once you get one that's good in that tone or from that perspective, like move on, do something else.
Yeah, have some fun with it and try some different alts, because you'll be surprised when you get to certain scenes at times that you're like, oh man, I wish I had this a little more like this, and we were thinking about it on the day, but we just got, we just moved on.
But whatever. We'll go and we'll watch everything, like literally from the pre-roll to like way after the cut, and every second of footage we'll watch it again. And I can't tell you how many times we've gone through and pulled a look from something that was way after cut or way before action.
Yeah. And that's really valuable to us, because if we weren't watching all of the footage over again from beginning to end, every ounce, every second of footage that we had, we wouldn't know what we had to pull if we had to save a moment. We wouldn't know what we could salvage if we could.
Oh, remember that B-roll where the elf is just kind of staring off into space, and you're like, couldn't it be cool to have that moment as Chris is talking to the elves on that moment? You can go back and get it, right? But
if you don't have that, you don't know that you can even salvage that. So.
Or if we as filmmakers don't know it exists.
Yeah.
Right. Because you're like, oh, well, you're not when you've got 3 cameras rolling, it's really hard to watch every camera. And then you're going through and you're only looking at the 5 selects that an editor has presented for you. Well, you never knew that the elf staring off into space existed. That's all on the editor to remember that. So fortunately for Ian and I, we fill our brains with as much of that information as possible.
Yeah.
That's incredible that you say that, because as you were thinking about scenes that you really work on, that you're attached to, I've seen scenes in movies that single-handedly, because of one joke or one bad improv, and oh my God, everybody, comedy's hard, and comedy's hard to do, and comedy's hard to add especially when you're making a serious movie. You can have a serious movie and be funny, but like the latest Halloween has 2 jokes in it. Like with Jamie Lee Curtis, she is suffering from PTSD. She's Laurie Strode. She's aged 40 years. She has a house, a fortress, and it's supposed to be set up. And everything in the movie is kind of like, oh wow, this is serious shit. But there's these kind of random improv comedy scenes that are added in that just seem like they're in an entirely different movie. And just as a film fan, I just kind of really wish they're not there, because I'm like, as a viewer, I watch with my heart. Every movie I watch that I'm into, I watch with my heart and my stomach and my gut. And I'm like feeling it, like you're going up the roller coaster. And then there's this joke that kind of just makes you go, what? Why did they do that? And it's like there's these 2 cops talking about like a mochaccino or something, or some sort of latte for like 5 minutes in a Halloween movie, and you're just kind of like, could you guys not? Or the stepdad is like, oh, bang me in my dick, and I'm like, no, like it's these little scenes that I'm very grateful. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is that Walton is pretty much the funniest guy in the movie, and he's the most lethal, and he does funny things, but it's never clownish. Like shit can happen to him and he can fall over, but there's never any cause for sound effects or doings or bings. And the funniest scene in the movie is when he's driving and it does a hard cut to him pissing. And for some reason that made me laugh, and I rewound it twice. I'm like, that is fucking great editing. I did not know that was coming. That is a great cut, and I'm saying this all because it's a tribute to your directing and editing style, that these gags, no, I wouldn't call them gags, these moments under somebody else who doesn't understand how to pace these things could have ruined their own movie by adding them, but you are so good at actually placing them amongst the serious stuff. It's almost a breath of fresh air from tension. And that's what I like about this movie. It's kind of like swimming in an ocean where you don't know if you're going to get to where you're going to go without drowning. And these little things are the little breaks of intensity, swimming, the metaphor of intensity. And these little breaks are kind of like what allows the audience to kind of like breathe a sigh of fresh air, because the tension is so high. So was it kind of like, just asking someone who likes editing, you clearly like editing, was it kind of like a battle to make sure that those kind of moments didn't intrude on the serious tone that you're trying to portray? Because it's a delicate act, and I see a lot of films ruin themselves by adding humor in the wrong places. So was it hard?
It's interesting because when first you write a script, right? And you're hoping that the tone and the pacing of your comedy or your dark comedy and your action, your drama are all sort of playing, like you said, in this nice wave that's giving you, peaks of tension and releases of comedy in little dips. And you don't want to release them too far because then they kind of fall out of the reality of it. And you don't want to hold them too long because then it kind of loses its punch. And I think that kind of attributes back to that editing process that we were talking about, where we're screening it for all these people, because like you're saying, it's like how long do you hold it? How long do you let it go? And I think it's a personal taste, but then there are some moments where, maybe you have screwed it up, or maybe you have reached a little too far, you're pushed a little too far. And that's what those screenings do for us too, in that, we'll ask specific questions about that and moments we're nervous about. And at times people it's great when people come forward and people start talking about those scenes without you having to bring them up. But at times we have to instigate, where maybe they're letting it slide, or maybe they're not pinpointing, or maybe they're not thinking about that at the time. But we'll literally be like, hey, what did you think about that little montage of him driving, where he's brushing his teeth, driving, then pissing, then eating a whatever. And like, I remember when we first started screening it, like they were like, it's a little long. And we're like, okay.
But mind you, that sequence is like 22 seconds, or it's like because it's so condensed. But I think at that time it was 30
seconds.
Or 30
it was
seconds.
like 30 seconds long. Like, it's a little long. We're like, okay, well, they're like, but I liked it. I like the vibe. I like how it changes music. I like us doing this. And it was literally like 5 seconds per cut or 5 or 6 seconds per cut. And we were like, well, let's see what happens when we turn it up to 3 seconds per cut, you know? And it was literally that kind of process. And then it's like, where does it go in the movie? Because we wrote it in at this part, but then would it be better a little earlier? Because maybe you would get we need a break there because it's a little flat and it's not as funny there. So maybe
more energy.
Maybe we'll just pull this over a sequence and put it a little earlier, or put it one later. And I can't remember if we moved it or not, but we certainly played with moving it or not. And it was like, oh, it felt a little off there. Let's move it back to where it was. Or we were like, you know what? Great. That played great right there. Let's leave it right there. So it's a process. It's a process, like you're saying. And that little testing process, I think a lot of people, a lot of filmmakers we know that we've worked with and that we collaborate with that are friends of ours, like they don't quite do as an extensive one as us a lot of times, but they do it, and it's very valuable to them as well. But I think if you have the time to do it as much as you can to get every little hopefully beat or nuance or, you know, even the pacing of it down, and it's so valuable.
And it gives you a little objectivity, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're ever, you know, can't see the forest for the trees on your movie, invite 10 friends over and sit in the back of the room and watch it with them.
You'll instantly
suddenly your perspective takes a whole 180.
You'll just start
totally differently.
You'll start sweating at the parts that they're not laughing at that they should be. You'll start.
Oh God.
It's happened to us a million times on a million different things we've done. That's one of the beautiful things about the process is once you invite an outside audience in and have them start watching it, you instantly start seeing the flaws in it or where it could be better or what you think is improved. Once in a while you're wrong, but a lot of the times you're right. That vibe you're getting is the vibe that they're feeling.
And there was a previous movie that we did called Small Town Crime. And we learned a lot of lessons about humor, like when to put it, when to take it away. We had some jokes right before a very sort of serious moment.
And we pushed it too far.
And we went, well, if we, you know, and they were like, oh, you know, he's not taking this seriously or whatever it is. And we're like, oh, okay, well, we'll just trim out those.
So we slowly tapered these jokes out of this. And it was right near the ending shootout of Small Town Crime. There was 1 or 2 more jokes in there. And we literally like took one joke out and then played it. They're like, yeah, it's too jokey. We took 2 jokes out, played it. They're like, I don't know. It felt a tiny bit jokey, but I really liked the sequence. We took a 3rd joke out, and they're like, it's fucking perfect. I love that end sequence. It's so great. And it's a fresh audience every time. And then you go, okay, let's see if we've solved it for the people that thought it was too funny in the first time. Then we play it for some, like a group of 2 or 3 people that bring them back and have them watch that new version. If they're like, yeah, man, you solved it, or that plays really rough and tight for me and awesome, and the humor lasts right up to where we want it. Like those are the types of things we're gauging in those screenings.
But I think what you don't want to do is take the piss out of the stakes.
Yeah,
by a wrongly placed joke. And
that's kind of what I mean, Ryan. Where I'm like, it just takes it's probably a longer process. We probably can't see the forest trees as quicker as like another editor would coming in being like, yeah, I've done 25 movies. You're gonna want to pull the jokes back a little bit at the end, and then bing, bam, boom, we're moving into this. You know, it's probably a little slicker if you bring in, you know, some guy that's done it 100 times. But I do feel like we learn a ton as filmmakers by doing it. And it makes us better at what we're shooting for sure and what we're writing, because every time we head out on one of those jobs, whether we're writing, directing, or editing a project that we're doing, like we take that baggage from all those old projects and it really helps us craft something hopefully better every time.
It adds to the toolkit for sure.
Yeah. And something you were saying about just pacing, I can think of movies that, like, you know, and it's hard to work on stuff because I've done music videos where I was editing like some effects and going 30 seconds at a time. But then when you watch those 3 sequences in a row, you're like, fuck, this is a lot. Like, for what I wanted 30 seconds to be as entertaining as hell, it doesn't matter anymore if it's just flash, 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 flash. Like you gotta hold back to make sure your flash has more of an impact. And filmmaking is not easy, ladies and gentlemen. I've never edited a movie. I'm fucking impressed that you guys did as good. I'm gonna buy your other movie because I like this movie so much. I want to watch Small Town Crime now. It's filmmaking is not fucking easy. And when you did it at a budget that you did, and you filmed it in Ottawa, and did such a good job, because when you think a Christmas movie in Ottawa that wasn't a fucking Hallmark movie, you're assuming it's going to be low budget garbage, but just because something's low budget doesn't mean it can't be fucking beautiful and amazing. And I've seen film festivals where people produce such incredible things, like sometimes even for $6,000. It just goes to show, if you come with it with love and passion and the dedication that you guys clearly have, if you're going to watch your movie like 60 times and then show it to people, it just goes to show that there's still if you're always willing to learn, you're always going to improving. But but there are filmmakers out there that think they're awesome and their shit doesn't stink. And that's why their movies are sometimes 5 hours long and nothing actually happens in it, because they won't allow themselves to their ideas to be judged by their friends. You know, they'll surround themselves with yes men, and people are just like, yeah, man, another awesome one. Like, do your friends bust your balls about this kind of stuff?
We have about a dozen friends that I would say bring a lot of pain to anything and everything, and are incredibly critical. And we bring those sledgehammers in once we start feeling really good about the edit. And of course, they always find they're so overly honest and brutally honest with us. And you have to have those people when you're in the scripting process and when you're in the editing process. Those people are
they're invaluable.
They're invaluable. Thank you. Not unvaluable. Invaluable. They're invaluable because if you don't have people being brutally honest with you, you don't have anything. You don't know what you have. You don't know where you're at. So yeah, we probably about a dozen people in the scripting phase and that read our scripts and give us brutal honesty. And there's people that give us brutal honesty in our editing.
But
process.
we invite a pretty wide spectrum of people to these screenings. Like, we invite people that we don't know. We invite some friends, some people we don't know, people that hate us.
Not necessarily hate us, but don't like our movies. They don't like it's like bringing your mom, Ryan, into a test screening and being, let's see what Ryan's mom thinks of the fucking Hateful Eight cut we have. Like, check that out. And she's just like this the whole fucking time. Like, we have
I'm
those
intrigued
people.
to hear from those people, though.
Because they're like, I fucking just couldn't get past this. You're like, okay, well, that's the movie. There's nothing we can do about that. There's going to be blood, or, I can't do anything about whatever, because that's, I'm terrified of snow. Well, sorry, we're just snow in the movie. Whatever it is, like, there's always something. It's not my genre. Okay, but what did you think of this? Well, I wish it was a little more of this. Okay, do we have any more of that to even put in there? And would that ruin it for anybody that loves the film? I don't think so. So let's try to put a little more heart in there. Let's put a little more whatever in there. Like if we can do something to where we can move the ball for one audience member and not affect another, or maybe it's just going to be a plus for both, then we do it, and if it's not, then we're always kind of like, that's not our movie. I wish it was a little more of a rom-com. Well, it's not a rom-com, so it's all right. We don't have to worry about that note, that one doesn't work, but let's keep going here. But it's always surprising, something great and positive that comes out of those experiences.
Yeah.
I've seen so many Simpson episodes about focus groups where just like, hey, do you guys want Itchy and Scratchy to be the same as it always is? Yeah. Do you want to see something new and fresh? Yeah. So you want to see something new and fresh, but the same old stuff. And it
feels like that sometimes. It does feel like that.
Yeah. So when it comes to you guys were mentioning just deleted scenes, I watched a deleted scene, and as I rewatched the movie, I remembered the deleted scene and being like, "Oh yeah, that's not in there. That was a deleted scene."
Yeah.
And it's where Billy fires the housekeeper, and it's pretty near the ending. It's like, "Oh, Grandma wants to make sure everyone's out of the house because Walter Goggins is going to come over with a kidnapped young girl." So basically, I'm kind of understand. If I were to understand this, it's because you wanted the moment the audience to realize what a horrible piece of crap he is by going down in the basement to unveil that the young girl is down there. And if he fired the housekeeper beforehand, you would pre-hate him before you're supposed to hate him, right?
Yep. Yeah. It was getting the cart ahead of the horse
there. Yeah.
Yep.
And that shit happens, right? You write something, it works great on the page. People read it, they're like, "Oh, this is a great build up to what's her name being in the basement." We're like, "Oh yeah, great." We shoot it, seems to be working. We put it in the first edit, it seems to be working because that's what's in our head and it's rolling. You show it to people and they're like, "Yeah, I was just too far ahead of it. I kind of knew that he was just like this really horrible bastard." And when we got down into the basement, I was like, "Yep, he's that horrible." But now you pull it back a little bit up there, and then you get back down into the basement, and they're like, holy shit. It's like a great holy shit kind of like, whoa, like he's this much of a bastard, you know?
And that was
great.
a really tough scene to cut because we thought Chance was excellent in the scene, and we had a blast shooting it. But you got to kill your darlings, unfortunately.
And the woman who played the maid was excellent in it. She was so great to cut to. As she was crying and losing her shit, then you felt horrible for her, but it made you hate him so early that you just weren't surprised what he was capable of after that.
Okay, yeah, that makes so much sense. Like I said, just I love editing. I love the process of it. Was what would you say the entire movie was a scene that really wasn't even supposed to be what it was, but like, you know, due to some happy accidents in the editing floor, like, why don't we try this? And all of a sudden you have that eureka, holy shit moment where you're like, this scene is better than we ever thought it was ever going to be. Like, we thought this was just going to be a scene in the movie, but it turns out to be like one of your favorites based on that kind of like, you know, happy accident in the editing room.
For me, it goes back to that scene in the pet shop where as we thought we knew how it was going to play out, and the ending's a tiny bit different than the way we wrote it. And it was just some good little editing moments in there that made it work, I think, a lot better than it was playing. Because like I said, it was on the chopping block at one point that we were just like, man, should we even keep this? And is it redundant? And does it even, like, is this even really working? And does it even have a good enough button at the end of the scene? And now I feel like it does. And it's actually one of the scenes that we get, you know, not necessarily complimented on the most, but people talk about the most, and they're just like, I love that scene, and I love this moment at the end when he talks about his mom, and he really sticks it to the pet owner for jibing him about being a snake person and kind of really taking the piss out of him. So like that scene really stands out to people in a positive way for a lot of people, and I'm glad we kept it. And I think that scene does a lot for Skinny Man and for the movie at that point, because it's definitely kind of a dark laugh. It's a gap humor kind of paying off there in that scene. And it gives you a little bit more of a layer into his psyche and how he grew up and his parents and how he was raised and what they were like. And as him as a person with the whole snake person thing, which obviously she's right about in the pet shop. And that's what pisses him off even more.
And so I guess for me, I have a couple of them. One is the driving montage across country. And that was fun because we just literally jumped in a car and ran around with Walton for about 6 hours and shot him doing a bunch of crazy stuff from the back seat, which was great fun. I mean, we literally stopped in front of a grocery store, ran in there, bought 2 bagfuls of groceries, and just started handing them stuff like a full chicken and a soda and a toothbrush, and just said, hey, go with it, you know, figure that stuff out.
Yeah.
And although there was a ton of stuff we couldn't use because we knew it was going to be edited down, but we just wanted to try a bunch of shit. There was one moment where he's spinning donuts in the parking lot, which was really funny. But it didn't make the cut, obviously, because it makes no sense as why he's spinning donuts in a parking lot in the middle of a travel sequence.
And then I guess another one that came together and was a bit of a shuffling of scenes that surprised us was the part where Walton he's trying to track down Chris where Chris might be, and he takes a draw of the cigarette, and the Asian music starts playing, the Chinese music starts playing, and that sort of carries us through the diner and the grappling and all that stuff, and it drops us in Billy's house. And for that, like, we really enjoyed how that sequence sort of came all together, and we moved a couple scenes around to make that moment what it was.
There was another moment where Billy, that used to kind of go into that, or right after that, and it was Billy meditating to the Napoleon poster, which was really funny and kind of fit into this moment, but we ended up cutting it out and then reappropriating the moment where he breaks his arm and putting it into that montage there with that music under it. And man, it really sung for us.
And that really came from finding that track.
Yeah.
And that was just us sitting around machines, just goofing and like, oh, what if he listens to like 80s Chinese music? You know, and like we just like went and found a bunch of tracks on the internet there, and that one stood out to us. We got a gas out of it. So like, let's drop it underneath there. And then from there, the scene built out.
Awesome. Elisa's asking, is the donut scene in special features?
The donut scene.
The car when he's spinning out.
Oh, no. I mean, it was all from that perspective of through the windshield from behind Skinny Man. So it was him spinning donuts and laughing manically as he was spinning donuts. It was.
We could definitely cut a 10-minute short film out of just that footage.
His travel across country. I mean, there was one point where he was threatening people as he was driving by them, and someone tried to walk across the crosswalk, and he would like jam the car at him and joke and like really like.
And then I don't know. He went through a McDonald's drive-through. I mean, there was a lot of a lot of stuff.
There's some
Walton
really
was having
funny
funny stuff.
Yeah, but obviously we had to get it down to something that was, lean and mean, and that's what made it.
I just remembered something in the movie. It's actually I have many favorite parts, but I have this really one of my favorite parts is that kind of like Billy the entire time, like how is he financing Skinny Man, like this professional assassin, the most deadly of deadly? He's forging checks from his grandmother and stealing money from her. And it's kind of like how he's paying for all this notorious shit he's doing, including going and gambling and all this other crazy shit. What I really like at the end is the grandmother, who you think is this submissive, like sad old frail lady who just wants milk to go to sleep and stuff like that, is this fucking like. She is just a pistol, man. She's on the phone saying like, "Where's my fucking money? If you don't find my money, someone's stealing my shit. Who the fuck is stealing my money?" And all of a sudden, they're like, grandma has this energy where you're like, "Oh shit," Billy is not the first like vicious bastard in his family, and for the old lady to do that was such a cool revelation near the end. And guys, gentlemen, we've been talking for a long time, so it's okay for me to say this stuff, but it's just like the milk and the grandma's love of it is so pivotal, and you keep coming back to it. The first interaction she has with Billy, she's like, "Can you get me some milk?" And he gets a housekeeper to do it, and the only fucking time he actually ever brings her the milk himself is when he wants to fucking kill her. and then Santa Claus and then Chris comes in, and it's full of poison, and he just fucking drinks it, and you're like, "Fucking Santa Claus, you badass motherfucker!" You're like, poison. You're like, "Fuck!" Like that is genius filmmaking, gentlemen. Was the milk always the thing? And was grandma's turn always something like working in? You're like, "Oh yeah, you think grandma's going to be a nice, but it turns out that she killed the wolf,
Yeah. Well, yeah. In the script, it says in that scene, I think, to give the actor, kind of a nod to how we're hoping she plays it, is it said something like, "Grandma, we realized by her reactions on the phone that she, this is a reminiscent of her old money making days," is kind of how we put it. She's back and she's hot. And I remember even in the first scene with Grandma and Billy, like you see, we were trying to sort of stoke that flame a tiny bit just to show you that she had it in her. But
it's the competition in her.
When she starts to talk about, winning and he's like, "Yeah, that's what winners do." And she's like, "That's my boy." Like that you see this little undercurrent of darkness in her.
But sweet, but sweet. I don't want to tell you all your cards too soon.
Yeah, and then to play it up at the end when she realizes someone has her money, that's where she really gets pissed. It was fun. It was a lot of fun doing that. And we had like Deborah Grover, I believe is the actress's name, that played Grandma. She was so talented. She was just a tiger in that scene. Yeah, it was a blast working with her on that.
Oh, amazing. And the Elisa says one of my favorite scenes is crossing the border. Welcome to Canada. When exactly did you realize that the North Pole was going to be Canada? Oh, and this is my last question tonight, guys. I'm so sorry for keeping you on this long.
Ian's kid just be on. When did you realize what? That the North Pole was going to be Canada?
Yeah.
Well, he goes Canada. He goes through Canada to get to North Peak, Alaska.
Oh, okay. So it's not all right. Cool.
I mean, we just love the idea with that checkpoint scene of the border crossing that he could bring a cache of weapons anywhere as long as you have the right forms. It's crazy.
That's true. And it's especially when he goes, he's like, "What are you going to be doing in Canada?" "I'm going to be killing things."
Well, yeah, he's completely honest, and he's got the paperwork. He's fearless. He's got nothing to fear.
Yeah, my 7-year-old's going to bed. He just wanted to say goodnight, so I had to give him a kiss.
Oh, that's so sweet. Right now, it's like 12 in Canada right now, like closer to Alaska than you guys are. It's like it's funny. It's 12:30, but we still got people watching. And like, frankly, I'd just like to thank you guys again, because Montreal, man, we need this entertainment. This is live entertainment, spontaneous stuff. And if we're gonna be at home glued to our devices, it should be stuff that is only happening at the current second. So grandma scene was absolutely nuts. heartbreaking the way he treated the housekeepers. I need to know this though, guys, because only you know this, and I've seen the movie twice, and I can't verify this, and you know this. Did the girl actually cheat in the science fair? Did her parents help her a little too much? Was Billy at all justified in accusing her of being a cheater, or is he just fucking crazy?
He's fucking crazy.
Yeah, she earned. If you look at the projects closely, like hers is a little more rough on the edges, and his is
super dialed.
Like a pro made it. So if anyone maybe got a little outside help,
it was probably
Billy. It's probably Billy, you know, and he's sort of putting his baggage on her.
Okay. All right. Good. Now that I know for sure, I can rest easier. All right.
Moral. Exactly. She won fair and square.
All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for dropping by. I've got 2 hours and 19 minutes. You guys are the nice. You think you guys are Canadians for fuck with how generous you are with this time. Everybody out there right now, buy FATMAN on Blu-ray. This is a movie about Santa Claus that you do not need to see at Christmas time, because Christmas comes and goes in that film. It's more along the lines of it's about the life of Kris Kringle being disenchanted, and Christmas Eve bears no meaning on it. So you can watch it on a cold night in January and feel just as close to it as you would in November and December. And that's brilliant. And that is brilliantly put, gentlemen, because, you know, I can't really imagine watching the Santa Claus with Tim Allen in April, but I definitely could watch FATMAN as long as there's some semblance of snow around. It snows longer here, but everyone out there, especially in Canada, I believe it came out in Walmart first. It's definitely still there. We're talking only $20 Canadian for a Blu-ray with so many special features, and a movie that is near and dear to my heart and became an instant classic. And as you know, I have a Christmas band called the Holiday Hooligans, and every year except this year, for the last 13 years, I've played Christmas charity shows. Christmas is a large part of my life, so it's nice when a movie comes in and kind of kicks my ass. You know, it doesn't just come in and just kind of coasts. A lot of Christmas movies, they coast. You know, they kind of just come in, they ride the wave, and then they leave. This is a Christmas movie that will awaken you when you're sleeping and shove coal in your face if you're a bastard. It's great. Everyone out there, definitely buy the Blu-ray. Do you have anything to say to the audience before we go off into that good night?
No, it's 12:30 over there. You guys should be in bed.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for hanging out with us.
We're bad for keeping you up. Yeah, we're excited to. I mean, you make these things to connect with people, so we are excited to connect with people and talk about it, because that's why we made the damn thing. We're excited to talk about it. It's fun.
Awesome.
So thanks for
awesome.
We appreciate it, man.
You guys are good people. All right, I'm gonna say goodbye to you properly right after we end this live feed, but thank you very much, everybody. Are you guys on Instagram, Twitter, or anything like that you guys want people to
Facebook,
you know?
I'm at Ian Nelms on Twitter, and we're Nelms Bros on Facebook and Nelms Bros on Twitter as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. As far as the audience is concerned, have a good night, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. This was fucking awesome. All right. Take it easy.